All right, good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the City of Healdsburg City Council Redevelopment Successor Agency meeting. It's October 7th, a little after 6 o'clock. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Harrod.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Vice Mayor Mitchell. Here. Mayor Hagley.
Here. If everybody could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first up is approval of the agenda.
I move to approve.
Second. We have a motion in 2 seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no opposed, we'll move on to report on closed session. We did have a closed session
No reportable action was taken.
right there. Next up is announcements and presentations, and we'll start off with proclamation declaring the month of October 2024 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
So it's my honor to be able to read this proclamation. So a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg recognizing the month of October 2024 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas the City of Healdsburg recognizes that domestic violence affects 1 in 4 families in our local community, and the crime of domestic violence violates an individual's privacy, dignity, and security based on the systematic use of emotional, physical, sexual, psychological, and economic control or abuse. Established in 1976, the YWCA Sonoma County is our community's singular and vital resource for local residents experiencing violence in the place we should all feel the safest, inside our homes. And whereas YWCA operates Sonoma County's only confidential safe house shelter and Sonoma County's only 24/7 domestic violence crisis hotline, and the YWCA's Counseling Support Services offers trauma-informed individual and support group therapy for victims of trauma and domestic violence, including the students at YWCA's Therapeutic Preschool, serving one of our most vulnerable populations, children's ages 3 to 5 years old. And only an informed community effort will end the cycle of violence for local families. And members of our community are encouraged to participate in YWCA's scheduled events and programs to raise much needed funding to support their vision for every family in Sonoma County to live healthy, productive lives and be safe in their own homes. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby declares the month of October 2024 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Healdsburg.
Thank you. And I believe we have somebody here to accept the proclamation. Oh, welcome. Can you make sure you push the button so the green light comes on?
How's that?
There we
That's
go.
better.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Madeline Keegan O'Connell. I'm proud to be this. And I'm here on behalf of our board of directors, all of the families in our care, our staff and our volunteers. We are honored by you honoring Domestic Violence Awareness Month with your proclamation. We're also very thrilled to have opened our preschool center here in Healdsburg. And so for those of you who may not know, and I'm preaching to the choir here, we do have 2 classrooms over at the Healdsburg Community Center, one for infants and toddlers and one for preschoolers. And many of you may have attended our ribbon cutting and we were noted in the Healdsburg Tribune. So child care centers are a very important and vital piece of what it is that YWCA does. And at the root of it, of course, is domestic violence services. Domestic violence will impact 1 in 4 women. And the way I look at the world, that's 1 in 4 families. 1 in 7 men will be victims of domestic violence. And that's why we've created an event called Why I Run. It's a fun run walk happening this month, Domestic Violence Awareness Month at Spring Lake in Santa Rosa. And I've passed out some flyers about asking your community to attend. So thank you very much for your kind attention to my comments.
Thank you. And if you can stick around a little bit, I know you want to stay for the whole meeting, but we'd like to do some photos. So once we're done with the proclamations, we'll do some photos.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, next up is a proclamation recognizing Latin American Heritage Month.
I'd like to introduce a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring September 15th to October 15th, 2024 as Latin American Heritage Month. Whereas the United States observes National Hispanic Heritage Month annually to celebrate the culture, heritage, and countless contributions of those with Latin American ancestry. And Healdsburg recognizes the rich diversity of immigrants from various Latin American countries, each bringing unique traditions and perspectives to our community. Healdsburg's 2020 strategic plan emphasizes valuing our diverse heritage and embracing thoughtful change to create an attractive, healthy, and prosperous community for all. Latin Americans are integral to Healdsburg's identity, with 27% of our broader population and 65% of our school district students identifying as Hispanic or Latino. And despite the active participation of Latin Americans in the neighborhoods, schools, economic sectors, and political leadership of Healdsburg, Latin Americans remain underrepresented and underserved in our community. Latin Americans continue to enrich Healdsburg's cultural, educational, economic, and political landscape with their diverse contributions and perspectives. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby proclaims September 15th through October 15th, 2024 as Latin American Heritage Month and encourages all residents of Healdsburg to share in this special annual tribute by learning about and celebrating the generations of Latin Americans who have influenced and enriched our community. Thank you.
All right, I think we have a couple people here to accept this. Welcome.
My name is Lee Stokes. I'm the board chair of Corazon Healdsburg, and we're really pleased to receive this honor from the city council. I'd like to introduce Jaime Gutierrez, one of our board members. We're representing the board, and Marcy Flores, our magnificent executive director who couldn't make it tonight. So I'm standing in for Marcy. But we love this community. We believe in enriching it with all the gifts that our program participants can provide, and we're very pleased with the partnership that we have with the city council. And I invite everyone to show up at Dia de Muertos at the end of this month on the plaza. Thanks.
Thank you. Jaime, you want to say anything or?
Just thank you so much for the proclamation recognizing an amazing community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is a proclamation honoring Edgar Diaz. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg honoring Edgar Diaz for his dedicated service to the City of Healdsburg and the community. Whereas Edgar Diaz moved to Healdsburg with his family in 1955 and established E&M Electric and Machinery repairing electric motors for local customers. And Edgar Diaz gave his time to various community organizations, including the Healdsburg Booster Club, Kiwanis, Chamber of Commerce, and the City Council. And Edgar Diaz played a pivotal role in the maintenance of the Healdsburg Museum and helped ensure that the grounds were well maintained so we could have the best small town museum possible. And Edgar Diaz generously made a significant difference in the community, from funding preschool programs and Little League teams to participating in live auctions like the FFA cake auction. Edgar Diaz was known for his selflessness and willingness to step in and help whenever he saw need, often going above and beyond what was expected. And Edgar Diaz was a pillar of strength and love for his family. And Edgar Diaz juggled the demands of running a business and the joy of being a full-time family man, always prioritizing the needs and happiness of his loved ones. And Edgar Diaz instilled in his family the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness can make a significant difference in the community. And Edgar Diaz had a powerful personality that inspired and motivated those around him, making a significant impact on both his family and the community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby honors Edgar Diaz for his outstanding service and dedication to the City of Healdsburg and recognizes the profound impact he made on the lives of countless individuals and the community.
First of all, thank you. Saying that my dad was the loudest voice in the room is an understatement. I'm Paul Diaz. I'm here on behalf of, well, that half of the room. A lot of family members here, including my mom, Judy. My dad really believed in community service. He loved not just living in Healdsburg, but he believed it was everybody's responsibility to give back. And that's why he'd had a stint on the city council behind that, well, a 3-block over desk that used to be City Hall. That's why he was part of the chamber. That's why he was in Kiwanis. That's why every time a kid was playing in any of our games, there was my mom and dad in the stands every time. It was a constant in our lives growing up. But my dad really believed in giving back. It tickled him to do it anonymously sometimes. So oh my, can you believe that? It tickled him to do it anonymously, like the museum. He just really enjoyed that. So on behalf of my family, thank you very much for the proclamation. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And if we could we'll start maybe with the Diaz family. If you guys all want to come up, let's get a picture. There's plenty of room. You're right in the middle. Great.
Up next is Latin American Heritage Month. Sorry, what?
Excellent. No, I do not. Thank you all very much. Sorry. Thanks, Chris.
All right, where's
Right here. See next week, what is going
Thank you. All right, I always like proclamations. Next up, city manager reports.
Thank you and good evening. I've got actually quite a handful of updates, so bear with me. Wanted to first acknowledge we had, as I know many in the community are aware, a power outage yesterday. So just wanted to provide a little bit more information about that. We had an outage affecting several hundred customers pretty early morning yesterday. It seems like always on a Sunday for these types. But our team was able to get out there. I think it was 86 minutes, getting a team out and getting power restored, which is pretty good. And checking after the fact, what we've determined was the cause was a squirrel making contact with high voltage wires. So not a good situation for the squirrel. But one thing I wanted to note, which I understand a little better now than I actually did 30-ish hours ago, is that people might wonder, well, doesn't that happen all the time? And I don't think it's that common, but it does happen sometimes. And usually the power comes right back on. But given the season that we're in and the weather conditions that we're experiencing, we're in a higher state of alert for fire danger. So we actually had different settings in place and a different process in place, which required some staff on site and some added caution before we restored and reactivated power, just to make sure we didn't trip anything and cause a fire situation. So wanted to share that with the community and the council and just let folks know that we were certainly on it really quickly. We had a team out there very fast and just wanted to make sure we did it in the right way, given that it was very hot, very dry, to make sure that there was no risk of an incident. And obviously that came out fine. So we appreciate everybody's patience with that. One other response item from the past several days, we did send an engine company out to the Glen Haven incident near Clear Lake on Friday as part of an initial response. I think there were several strike teams that came out from Sonoma County to help with that. It pretty quickly got to about 400 acres. And so we were proud to be able to take part in that response and send an engine crew from our fire department. They were back within right about 24 hours, I think. So it was part of that initial, I think, generally successful response, as structures and a lot of land was threatened, but they were back safely. And so we're thankful to them. We're thankful to our electric crews. We had a lot of folks working extra time over the last several days. Looking forward, October 12th through 19th is North Bay Zero Waste Week. So that's put on by Zero Waste Sonoma, of which we're a part. I'd encourage people to go check out Zero Waste Sonoma for a number of programs and activities related to that. Just a couple things I'll note is that there will be an e-waste recycling drop-off in Windsor, which is always a good thing to take advantage of if you've got a lot of e-waste filling up your garage, as I do. There'll be tours of the Recology recycling facility. And at next week's farmers market here in town, we will have a giveaway for the countertop compost bins, which we've done a few times in the past and it's been very popular. So we'll make, I think, 240 of those available. So if there are households and families that haven't yet gotten one of those, encourage people to come by, one per household, but we encourage people to come by next week's farmers market to pick up one of those. And two other items to mark your calendars. This Friday morning, our police department will be holding a coffee with the cops at 10 a.m. at Starbucks. Just a chance for people to come and get to know your police officers, ask questions, share concerns. That is a double booking with, hopefully will be, if everything goes smoothly, a ribbon cutting at Soulful in town, but I think that might be different target audiences. So hopefully both of those events will work out fine. And then lastly, coming up on the 19th, one of my favorites is the Halloween Pet Parade at the Plaza. That'll be Saturday the 19th at noon. I think Vice Mayor Mitchell will be a MC for that, and both of the chiefs and myself will be proud to return to our role as judges. So one of my favorite community events of the year to see the costume pet parade. So look forward to seeing you all out there. Thank you.
All right, any questions? All right, with that, we'll move on to public comments on items on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. This time is set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest not on the agenda but related to city council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, the city council cannot consider any issue or take action on any request during this comment period. So with that, I'd like to open up public comment on non-agenda items. Kathy, come on up.
Hi, Kathy Waterbury. I know this is Lampton, what you guys just announced, and I'm very sad to hear how Romos is being treated by the city council, allowing the new development behind it. He's going to be kicked out of his space. His father repaired our shoes. He repaired our shoes. So I know about city code, but you think this one time you would want to give a shaft to a local resident that's been here probably longer than most of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Richard, welcome. Is the light on?
Now it is.
There it is. Thank you.
The intensity and negativity on social media over Measure O makes me very sad. For 23 years, I've participated as a private citizen in hundreds of meetings of the City Council and the Planning Commission. I learned to trust the good intentions of all my neighbors who choose to serve. Because I felt strongly about changing the GMO, I served on the Housing Committee in 2015-16. It is disturbing that many of the objections to Measure O are inaccurate, plainly wrong, fabricated, or just demonstrate a simplistic view of how housing gets built. The ballot measure is not about building hundreds of units. It only sets the stage for a meaningful response to the city's housing needs, a stage for a play that hasn't been written yet. Measure O proposes exempting 4 areas from the GMO in order to build multiple residential units beyond the 30 allowed annually by the GMO. Each of the 4 areas in the ballot measure could have different densities and regulatory controls. The changes to the land use code and zoning will determine what can be built. They are not written yet. The density study the city commissioned was only a simulation, an effort to see what increasing density might yield. The recommendation of 65 units per acre was a straw limit for the purposes of that demonstration. This is why the numbers used by the objectors have no bearing on what might be decided when Measure O passes. Healdsburg's small town charm was once a fact. Now I believe it's mostly a marketing slogan. We are a destination and a posh one at that. That success combined with the GMO led to increased housing prices, burdensome commutes for the very workers supporting our current identity, and our children not being able to raise a family here. The focus on tourism succeeded in spades, helped by the GMO. Measure O is like what Harmon Heald did in the 1850s. He imagined a town, and so he laid out, with our plaza in the center, what we see today. He only set the stage for a town to grow. Measure O sets the stage for the city to respond to the housing needs of the community's workforce and residents, but it only sets the stage. When it passes, I earnestly hope those concerned about negative outcomes will participate in the process of changing the land use code and zoning for those 4 areas with the same energy and concern they are expressing today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Anyone else? Welcome. Oh,
John Haupt, manager of the Healdsburg Regional Library. I just wanted to express gratitude and thanks for a couple of years now of working together on the lease on the 139 Piper Library building and space. And happy to see the funding on the consent calendar today towards the project, which I'm happy to report the contractor, general contractor, EF Brett, has jumped right into that project. Last week was a demo week, and the photos and videos I'm seeing from inside are really stunning. Lots and lots happening in there, and it'll be really wonderful to see, you know, how the upgrades to the building will, you know, impact quality of life and how people can interact with their library for years to come. So thank you so much to city staff for working with us so well over at Healdsburg Community Center. And we'll look forward to several more months of working together over there. Thanks so much.
thanks, John. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you for the public comment. Next up is the consent calendar. I'd entertain a motion if there's nothing that's going to be polled or discussed.
Move to approve?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. The consent calendar is approved and we'll skip over public hearings because we have none. Skip over old business because we have none. Jump right into brand new business. Adoption of updated emergency operations plan. Welcome.
Good evening, I'm Kelsey Carrero. I'll be discussing updating our emergency operations plan with you this evening. Next slide, please.
Can you move the mic closer a little?
There,
Thank
better.
you.
There we go. All right, so first off, what is an EOP? An EOP is a key component of an emergency management program that establishes the overall authority, scope, and functions performed during incidents. It assigns responsibilities to organizations and individuals and shows how all actions will be coordinated. It also describes how people and property are protected. An EOP identifies personnel, equipment, facilities, supplies, and other resources for incidents. It also reconciles requirements with other jurisdictions. And an EOP is flexible enough that it will work for any emergency. Next slide, please. So there's a few different levels of planning. Strategic planning is about big picture thinking, resource allocation, and future growth, while operational planning is concerned with immediate objectives and responding to changes in the environment. Strategic plans shape our operational and tactical plans. The EOP is a strategic plan, and the subsequent annexes are operational plans. Next slide, please. So the current EOP was adopted in 2021. And since then, there have been several reasons that we need to update the plan. Some of those have been in updating our Emergency Operations Center, updating our organizational structure, updates to city staffing, as well as the development of a new local hazard mitigation plan. As you probably remember, earlier this year, we updated our local hazard mitigation plan, or LHMP. That plan focuses on mitigation efforts for hazards and vulnerabilities in our community, where the EOP focuses on responding to and recovering from those hazards. So during the update process, we drafted a working draft of the EOP, and then leadership from all the city departments with roles and responsibilities defined in the EOP were engaged to ensure the EOP was reviewed and analyzed from a variety of professional perspectives and to capture the valuable experience that we've got over the past few incidents we've had in the city. Additionally, we engaged Sonoma County operational area partners to receive their feedback, and we incorporated feedback from the Sonoma County Access and Functional Needs Council as well into the plan. And City Council is responsible for adopting the emergency operations plan. Next slide, please. So the plan has 6 main components. I'm just going to give a quick overview of each chapter of the plan. So the first part is the basic plan, which outlines the purpose, scope, situation overview, and the planning assumptions of the emergency operations plan. Next, the concept of operations discussed is the 4 emergency management phases: preparedness, recovery, response, and mitigation. It also highlights the city's preparedness and training efforts. The city will identify potential threats to life, property, and the environment, and will develop plans and procedures to protect those assets and lives within its jurisdiction. Organization and assignment of responsibilities includes a number of several important legal and administration plan requirements that outline the city's hierarchy and process for emergency planning and preparation, and describes how the city uses important practices such as the Incident Command System and National Incident Management System. It also details how the city works with other jurisdictions in our operational area, region, and throughout the state to conduct mutual aid. Next slide, please. There are 7 hazards listed in the basic plan. These are listed in no particular order: communicable disease outbreak or pandemic, drought, earthquake, flooding, landslide, public safety power shutoff, and wildfire. Next slide, please. So to go a little more in depth with reasons we want to update the plan, we transitioned to the county EOP format because it's a best practice to try and move to one format throughout the county. We also have a new local hazard mitigation plan, and the mitigation action plan within the local hazard mitigation plan has created updates that we can add into our EOP. Additionally, we updated the Emergency Operations Center and made some structural changes to how the units are laid out in the EOC. So for example, we moved the GIS unit over into the planning section of the EOC. There's been several evolving best practices over the last few years as well. And we have incorporated those into the plan as well. There are a few new EOP annexes to incorporate within the plan, and we've also removed some topics so we can create standalone plans for those, including recovery operations and continuity of operations. Next slide, please. There are several annexes to the EOP that address hazard-specific incidents, and we're currently in the process of drafting function-specific annexes as well. These annexes provide EOC personnel with checklists detailing what should be accomplished before, during, and after an incident. For example, the earthquake annex to the EOP discusses response objectives specific to earthquakes occurring in Healdsburg. It provides an earthquake emergency action checklist, and it outlines earthquake response roles and responsibilities for emergency responders. Next slide, please. The EOP will be located on healdsburgemergency.org. There's also additional Healdsburg emergency management information located here, such as emergency preparedness, local hazards, other emergency plans, alert and warning, and evacuation information. Next slide. While we're on the topic of emergency management, I wanted to give a quick update on things that have been accomplished over the past year or so within the city's emergency management program. So to improve our preparedness, we just wrapped up September Preparedness Month, where the city put out several social media posts highlighting ways in which we can better prepare as a community. These tips included how to make an emergency plan, how to test your emergency plan, how to make an emergency kit, and how to start a conversation about preparedness with your loved ones. We have also conducted several trainings and exercises over the past year to ensure emergency responders are always trained and ready for any disaster. The city has also been working on our shelter operations as part of the Sonoma County Shelter Council, and we have been conducting trainings with them as well. Our local hazard mitigation plan was adopted earlier this year, and we have 15 mitigation actions that are ongoing currently. The city is also currently working on drafting an recovery operations plan and a continuity of operations plan. Next slide, please. The recommended action is to adopt a resolution approving the updated City of Healdsburg Emergency Operations Plan. If there's any questions, I can answer them now.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you so much. This is great. And the plan is so thorough, and it looks like you guys have done a tremendous amount of work and outreach. And when I say you guys, I know it's you, your whole department of one. So city staff coming together, and it shows, our level of preparedness, and I think our level of acknowledgement, right, that we're living in unusual times and compared to maybe where we were 10 years ago, thinking, no one could have predicted the wildfires and then the pandemic and then. So thank you. My question was about, so two things. I saw that it talks in the plan around how we communicate during times of emergency. And I know that during the Tubbs fire, and I think during Kincade, we had some power outages, and it was really difficult for folks to receive emergency information. And I think the city was kind of hesitant to overuse Nixle alerts, even though we knew that text message was likely a way for people to reach folks in the community, and there was no TV, their cell phone towers were not functioning, so it was really difficult to just know what was going on. And I saw that we are using certain avenues of social media currently, and I wonder, with new social platforms kind of becoming more available, Threads, which is a Meta product as comparison to X, formerly Twitter. And it looks like we're on Twitter and we use that, but we don't use Threads. And I was wondering, especially with a format that you don't have to be, it doesn't involve a lot of bandwidth to receive those kinds of communications. Is that something that we're looking to potentially expand over time to be, to have communication over different platforms?
Yeah, I think as social media is evolving, we have to evolve too and try to reach out to all of those that we can. And we will certainly be looking into all of the new ones coming out. So yes, we will take a look at that and see if that's another avenue to communicate with everyone.
Great. And then my last question's about the evacuations. And I had a conversation recently with a resident, and someone else had mentioned this a while ago, and it kind of, wasn't important at the moment, but it is now. I think we've had a couple of these freeway incidents lately where there've been, smaller accidents or problems on the freeway, and the highway patrol or police or fire have rerouted all of the 101 traffic through Healdsburg. And while I know that is not the type of event that's outlined in the emergency plan, it did rise to the level of creating a lot of anxiety for residents, that they basically saw our city completely gridlocked for a number of hours, that, CHP or whomever was rerouting everybody through town. And so it was impossible to get in or out of town or around. And it led folks to believe that should there be an emergency, this is what it would feel like. We'd all be unable to get on the freeway or get out of town. And so I'm curious if you have had any of that type of feedback, and also if that's something that even though it's not the type of event, how would it be different if we did have one of the events where that the EOP would be triggered? What would we do differently to make sure that people could flow easily in and out of town via car?
Well, we try to encourage people to have several routes away from their home or work within the city, and we will continue to encourage that. I know we have discussed down the road putting in a bike lane down the central Healdsburg Avenue where we can open that up during emergencies so that people are able to use that during an evacuation as well when that gets built. And we will definitely streamline which directions we have people go depending on what type of incident it is and where it is. And we can include that in all the messaging so people know exactly what roads to take to get out. And then police and fire will support to make sure that we can safely evacuate everyone as needed.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for this great work. I think you've been on staff now for what, about 2 or 3 years? I wonder if you could talk about kind of what kind of changes that you've been able to make, or is it technology or training or in your position?
A little of everything. We did a lot of technology upgrades in the Emergency Operations Center. We've written a lot of plans since I started, and we've been able to accomplish a lot of training. Having a dedicated person for the emergency management program allows me to focus on making sure we're getting all of those different aspects of the program completed and keeping it on everyone's mind so we can make sure that emergency management is a priority.
Yeah, and I'm certainly feel a lot of comfort from the fact that we've got this and that it's been updated, and there's a lot of focus and attention on it. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of reasons to have to look at an emergency plan with the fire and the drought and the floods, but it's always been impressive how they get handled. So I just want to say thanks for that. And, especially now with all the hurricanes and you're hearing all about the FEMA stuff, I feel like our city is really well positioned for any emergency as best they can. So thank you.
Thank you.
You have a question?
Not a question, just a quick comment. Just also wanted to convey my thanks and I think the document is impressive. It's super thorough and this is all kind of stuff that happens underneath the surface until something does happen. And it's important to recognize how critical it is to have that infrastructure in place. Safety, I think a lot of us would agree, is really the most important thing that we could be working on and supporting in our community. And so I really appreciate your part in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I'll open it up to the public. Any members of the public that would like to comment on this? Come on up, Kathy. Welcome. You get 3 minutes per topic, so you're good.
Button, there we go. I wonder if some of the printout for emergency kit, can they be printed out and maybe at the community center, the senior center? So people could go over the list and see what they need to do for any emergency. You find a lot of seniors have no access to internet. They have no way to print things out at home. That'd be great if they could print stuff out for the seniors and people who don't have a way to print out a list of what they need for emergency kits. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, seeing nobody rush the mic, I will bring it back. I just wanted to add a couple comments that I think what, we as council members get to see a little bit like behind the curtain on what goes on. And I got to see a little bit of that during the Kincaid fire in terms of not just the emergency stuff and gathering the information and working on getting the accurate information out that's Healdsburg specific, but our finance director was sitting there logging everything because we need to document every last penny to be able to get reimbursed. And that's something that I remember just struck me like, oh, it's not just, CNN's, breaking news center kind of thing. It's literally tracking everything like, Heather was on it. So it was great to be able to see that. But more than that, just, over the last years with all the different things that we've had going from Tubbs fire to Kincaid to everything else that we have going on or that has happened, to see how the improvements, going from Tubbs to Kincaid, the amount of improvements, and then even during Kincaid, the evacuation zones were still like they were better, but they were still confusing when they say, okay, Healdsburg, North Healdsburg, but it's not, they don't go down straight down to the street. And so now you look at the evacuation zones are really specific and I think the public has gotten a lot more educated on, just understanding where your evacuation zone is, having your go bags and things like that. So I think I'm really proud of this city and just the constant improvement and learning from, what didn't quite work as well. How can we improve it? So I really appreciate all the work done on this. And with that, I'd entertain a motion on this.
So I'm happy to make the motion to adopt a resolution approving the updated City of Healdsburg.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrod?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mitchell?
Yes.
Mayor Hagley?
Yes. Thank you very much. All right, next up is a presentation of the draft Healdsburg Active Transportation Plan. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Presenting with me today is Michael Harrigan, who has been managing this program or the effort from city staff. Aaron Ferguson from Fair & Pierce, who is the consultant, not presenting, but also in the audience. Behind me is Dana Teray from SCTA, who is overseeing the program countywide, and Kurt Bates, principal engineer, who's played a big role in this as well. So next slide, please. The action today is to receive the presentation of the draft active transportation plan and provide input. And staff will be back to council in January-ish to present the final plan for adoption. I would like to take a second to say that the original contract with Farren Pierce was for them to present at the final document stage. And I had suggested that we do it more at the draft stage, which was a little bit different from what other agencies are doing, because I thought maybe this would be a good time when it's going out to the public that council can provide input as well at that same time, so that there wouldn't be any surprises or change in direction by the time it gets to council for final approval. So hopefully that is okay with council. Next slide, please. The agenda today, we're going to go over the purpose of an active transportation plan, talk about the scope, vision, goals, existing conditions, the outreach summary, and then the meat of it, we go through the actual content, the policies and plan projects, and then talk about next steps. Before I turn it over to Aaron, I would like to just take a minute to talk about the fact that this is replacing our current bike and ped plan, which was a 2008. And the purpose of this plan, or how this plan is used, is going to be the same as how the previous one was used, which is similar to a general plan or a neighborhood plan. It is a it's non-constrained from a funding standpoint, meaning it is the vision of what we want to see in the future. And so it lists out a lot of things. And you have received some comments from some great community groups that have been involved in this process, asking for more specifics. And we just can't provide the details of the individual projects or schedules for when those projects will move forward when you don't have the budget constraints. So I just kind of wanted to lead in with that a little bit. And with that, I will turn it over to Aaron.
All right. Thank you, Larry. Next slide. Yeah, perfect. So the purpose of this active transportation plan, we'll call it an update, but it is kind of changing the name relative to your current bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And the intent there is to kind of do three things. So the first theme is thinking about all ages and abilities. And so as we are creating projects or introducing new policies, what we're really trying to do is create spaces for people to walk, bike, roll that are low stress, that are lower risk, and really create more opportunities for a wider range of the population to take part in walking and biking and rolling to meet their daily needs. Another kind of the second purpose is regional connection, and this really ties to SCTA's role in coordinating this active transportation plan update. And as we'll see in another slide or two, we're doing this in coordination with multiple agencies across the county to be able to identify and plan regionally. So think about regional routes and also kind of connectivity at those edges of the city limits with the county as well. And then the third purpose is to facilitate implementation. And so we'll talk about prioritizing projects, and in the plan itself, identify a number of potential funding opportunities to help advance implementation. Next slide. So as we've mentioned, this is part of a countywide active transportation plan effort. So with that in mind, the city of Healdsburg, along with a number of other local agencies in the county, we're creating active transportation plans for. So we've listed all those participants there on the left side of the slide. And this work effort is organized into roughly 7 different tasks. And this is an effort that's been going on for a little bit more than a year now, about a year and a half probably. And we started by establishing a foundation. And when we use that phrasing, it's really collecting existing data that's available, looking at other previously completed plans or efforts within the city and the community input that was provided through those, just like the local road safety plan had local input. So taking a look at what is all that existing information that we have to start with. And then kind of moving on to what kind of technical analysis can we do to begin to identify what are the project needs or opportunities, to be able to kind of update, improve, and expand the active transportation network. Throughout the project, we engage the community in a number of different ways, and we'll talk more about what that looked like, but essentially to get their input on what are the needs, concerns, as well as their input on the draft projects, and kind of used all of that information to craft what are the projects to improve walking and biking, what are those supporting policies, how can we implement or fund those, and then put together the actual draft plan documents themselves. And that's essentially where we're at now, in that sixth task of having the draft plans ready for public review, and then ultimately taking them forward for approval and adoption. Next slide. So the vision that's in the active transportation plan we have up on the screen now, and I'll read it for a moment. I will say that this is a countywide vision and countywide goals. This is part of that kind of countywide coordination. So the vision is, our guiding principles are to improve safety, connectivity, equity, and quality of life. Walking, biking, and rolling shall be safe and appealing modes for people of all ages and abilities to use for everyday transportation and recreation. Next slide. So around that vision, we developed 3 goals, and you can kind of, as you listen to that vision, hopefully kind of hear some of that all ages and abilities theme in it. And so the 3 goals, the first is connected and reliable. So deliver a continuous active transportation network that links daily activities and housing, and that allows people of all ages and abilities to use a variety of transportation types easily, affordably, and dependably. The second goal, safe and well-maintained, create and sustain a high quality and low stress active transportation network, employ Vision Zero and safety plan policies and strategies to advance this goal. And the third, community-oriented and place-based. Tailor projects to the surrounding community context and user profiles, support a diversity of uses and users, and create community through active transportation programs and policies that prioritize walking, biking, and rolling. In the plan itself, the draft plan itself, you'll see the policies organized in support of each of these goals. Next slide. So I've said this phrase a few times already, all ages and abilities. And again, the idea here is that we're identifying projects and supporting policies to really enable more of the population to choose to walk or bike or roll to their destinations, and really open up the opportunity for more people to use the streets in that way. This graphic is showing the all ages and abilities kind of conceptually as we talk about people who bike, people who choose to bike sometimes. And what you see here is a spectrum where the industry over the last 5 or 10 years, as engineers and planners, we've come to acknowledge that people have different levels of comfort or different levels of tolerance for what we call traffic stress. So how many vehicles are going by you, how fast they're going by you, maybe the noise level, all of these things impact our stress level when we're walking or biking. And some people have a higher tolerance for more traffic or higher tolerance for vehicles traveling at higher speeds. And this spectrum kind of indicates that, and it's based off of research that was done a few years ago. But essentially it says 1% or less than actually 1% of the population will bike wherever, whenever. They have a very high tolerance, high stress tolerance for a variety of road conditions. As engineers and planners, we don't have to do much for them to choose to bike. There's another kind of, as you move to the right, another 7% who are confident riders, capable riders, and they are maybe a little bit more susceptible to some of that traffic stress. But as long as you put down a bike lane, they're probably fine, and they're going to be out there riding their bike. There's a bigger portion of the population, that 60%, where we've come to recognize if we really want to see mode shift, we really want to see a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions because more people are choosing to walk or bike, we need to build a network that's attractive to that 60% who are interested and concerned. And so they're more susceptible and more discerning in some instances where they're not going to necessarily choose to ride on a street with a lot of cars or where they perceive to be high traffic speeds. And so these are the things that we keep in mind as we're thinking about what types of projects, what types of, in this case, bicycle facilities do we want to plan and build. Next slide. Another key theme for this active transportation plan is incorporating industry best practices. So as I mentioned, as an industry, we've gotten better at this over the last 5-10 years. And so there's a variety of kind of new construction techniques, new design guidance. There's new technology, micromobility, and electric assist on bikes and so forth for us to take into consideration. And so those are all integrated as part of this particular update. Next slide. So in the plan itself, you'll see a map of the existing bike facilities. And so these are the ones that are physically out there today. So the blue line is showing where we have multi-use paths. Yellow lines are showing where there's bike lanes on the street. And then the red color are showing which streets are designated as bike routes. Next slide. As part of this effort, we also inventoried the existing sidewalk gaps in the city. And so this map is showing in a couple of different colors where there's missing sidewalk on either one side or both sides of the street. And so both of these maps were part of that kind of baseline setting up of understanding what's out there today. Next slide. So I've mentioned kind of thinking about all ages and abilities and how can we kind of create places for people to walk and bike that are low stress. And so one of the analyses that we did was look at level of traffic stress. And this is really an engineering oriented tool where we're thinking about how many vehicles, what's the vehicle volume on a street, what's the posted speed, or if we have it, what's kind of the average or 85th percentile speed that vehicles tend to drive on that street, and then how much separation is there for people between where vehicles are moving and where somebody is biking or walking. And so this map kind of shows that gradation of lower stress routes in green, and then up to higher stress streets in that red color. So this was part of that kind of existing conditions look and technical analyses, and that we then kind of ultimately took out to the community. And I will say this is kind of the data piece of it. We did hear through community engagement and public input that many people also find what, as engineers, we might call low stress to still be stressful, particularly if they want to go out for a family bike ride or if they have their child on their bike with them. So I'll just offer that even though our data might indicate it could be lower stress, there might still be benefits to making changes to even kind of further lower the potential vehicle speed or stress of the route. Next slide. To kind of alluded that to the outreach a little bit. We did a number of different engagement activities to help inform the draft projects as well as get input on those draft projects. So we had online surveys both last fall and this past spring to get input from people in terms of what they saw as needs and concerns, and then also input on the draft projects themselves. And we had a number of community events that we attended. So pop-up events at the Housing Resources Fair last October, craft work, also last fall, Climate Fest in April, and then we hosted a community workshop in June, again focused around those draft projects. I'm gonna turn it over to Michael.
Unique to the city of Healdsburg, the city formed the Healdsburg Active Transportation Advisory Committee to enhance community input throughout the development of the plan. Members were selected through a call for applicants in June 2023, representing different backgrounds with varying degrees of experience in active transportation. Members have met, the committee has met over 10 times over the course of a year with both city staff and the project team. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank members of the committee. Many of them are here tonight for all their hard work, time, and commitment to the development of this plan. Next slide.
It really was a great group, a very diverse group. Next slide. So as Aaron mentioned, the policies, it's a very long list of policies within the document, are broken up to match the 3 goals that she had previously listed. I just put a few up here that were of note, and largely because these are things that have changed, or some of them have changed since the 2008 version of the Bike and Ped Master Plan. And because of the additional technology, as Aaron pointed out, we weren't talking a lot about e-bikes and scooters and other modes of transportation back then. And the other thing I'd like to point out is what has always been in our bike plan and is in pretty much every bike plan is supporting the education and encouragement of programs, something that Public Works Department is not great at, but we partner with Sonoma County Bike Coalition to work with our schools and to teach bike safety at those locations. Next slide, please.
These are the criteria used to guide how the ATP prioritizes projects, helping ensure that the most impactful and beneficial improvements are identified. The criteria was developed by Fear and Pierce and reviewed by city staff, and will be open to public comment through November 30th, providing the community an opportunity to weigh in on these criteria. Next slide. For each criterion, each project received a score based on the extent to which it fulfilled that criteria. The collective scores were normalized and tallied into a single index, and Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 were established to align with the top, middle, and bottom third of project scores.
So, and to add on to that, just because a project is Tier 1 versus Tier 2 or 3 doesn't necessarily mean that they will be built in that order. As I said at the beginning, we will use this document as we do a general plan or any other plan when there is an opportunity, whether we have a capital project, there's development, we refer to these guiding documents, and that's how we set conditions of approval for development. That's how we try to develop a scope of work for our capital project. If there's grant funding becomes available, this is a source for us to look for a good project to be successful in that grant. And there may be a case where the Tier 2 or Tier 3 is a better fit. So we rank them to be able to prioritize them when we can, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will be constructed in that order. Just wanted to make that clear. Next slide, please. So you do not need to read this, but this is just showing the very long list of sidewalk repairs. It is a bit misleading because some of the neighborhoods, particularly to the east side, as we know, were designed without sidewalks. Some of them, sidewalks are not feasible because of the size of the road or the location. But we did, at this point, decide to leave it in, at least in the draft, unless council directs otherwise, because we don't know what the future will bring. We don't know if maybe a neighborhood that previously was designed without sidewalks will somehow get revised. So when you see the numbers and the map for sidewalk repairs, just keep that in mind that it's more than what we would really be doing. Next slide, please. This is just crossing improvements, and it's about what you would expect on the busier roads where the public has concern about crossing a busy street. Next slide, please. And this is very similar to what we had talked about when we presented on Grove Street. And it's important for everyone to know the different bike facilities. We referred to them by class in the last time, and I'll just walk through it really quickly because I know you guys know it, but there are others who are watching who might not. And it's starting from the least separation to where we want to go. A standard bike route is a share the lane. A bike boulevard is a version of that where there's additional slowing of traffic, and we're really trying to encourage riders to go on that stretch. The standard bike lane, and then a buffered bike lane where there's a little bit of space between the lane and the cars. A separated bike lane, and we often say protected, separated. They are slightly different, even though most people will say them as the same thing. Separated would be cones or something that a vehicle could actually drive through. Protected would be something, concrete railing, trees, something that would be more substantial to prevent a car from entering into a bike lane. And then of course, multi-use paths, which would be our class 1. Next slide, please. So this is how the team chose which facility and which location. The considerations are all of the things that Aaron had talked about, the speed of vehicles, the number of vehicles, plus the amount of available right-of-way, the feasibility of actually doing the project at that point. If we had our way, we would have protected bike lanes everywhere. We know that's not feasible everywhere. And general industry guidance and the public and everyone else wants to increase the safety, increase the type of bike facility where we can. Next slide, please. So I can pause on these next few slides for as long as you guys need, but these are the list of the proposed bike routes. Again, the class 3 bike route, share the lane. Next slide. And this is the list of the proposed bike boulevards, which is the share the lane with additional traffic calming. And a few of these are going to also show up in the next slide. Next slide, please, Lonnie. So I may have skipped one, but that's okay. Stay here for now. So these were on that list. There were several that we could potentially enhance. And so here's a graphic showing a standard 40-foot roadway, which is very common. 2 12-foot lanes, 2 8-foot parking lanes. You see it all over the place. And the potential to enhance, the next level is if you take away parking on one side of the street, or the bottom one where you take away parking on both sides of the street. And you can see from a cyclist and pedestrian standpoint, potentially how much better that could be. But obviously there is a sacrifice in removing parking. If that's the street you live on, if you have a business there, that can become an issue. So the plan is showing these projects, but as I said, all of these projects in the plan will go through a process. When we have funding, when we're identifying it through development or a capital project, it will go out to community engagement, whether or not the type of project it is, it'll go to planning commission, it will ultimately come to council with that feedback from the community to determine what the project looks like. So again, the ATP is a guide to make us ask the questions, to bring it up, to be able to use it to condition projects. But council at the time when whatever project moves forward we'll be able to make these kinds of decisions on the individual streets as they occur. Next slide.
Yeah, this is the list of the proposed bike lanes or buffered bike lanes in the ATP. It's important to note for some of these projects, will require the prohibition of on-street parking, specifically Powell Avenue from Oral Drive to Ridgeview Drive. Next slide. The ATP, this is a list of the separated bike lanes in the ATP. I think it's also important to note for a couple projects like a separated bike lane on Dry Creek, the ATP only proposes to explore the feasibility of separated bike lanes in coordination with the planned US 101 and Dry Creek interchange improvements. The same goes for First Street, immediately adjacent to the Healdsburg Elementary School. Since that's a school drop-off zone, that's something that will probably need to be looked at. Next slide. This is the list of the multi-use paths in the ATP. All the projects listed here are planned and will be underway down the pipeline. Many of you are familiar with them. Next slide.
And so again, this is a slide you don't need to read, but what this is showing you in comparison to our existing bike plan, the additional connections being made. That is the ultimate goal. That's what we needed to do in updating our plan, is to try to create as many connections from as many places to as many destinations as we can safely. And so, yes, some of these are going to be bike routes versus bike lanes, but it's creating that path to travel so people wouldn't leave their house, have a map to look at, a way to go, a sign on the road that's sending them on the best path, even if it is sharing the lane at portions to wherever they're going. Next slide, please. So just a quick comment on other things that aren't in the plan, but that we are doing and are very related to it. As you know, our e-bike share, at some point, the pilot will expire and we'll be back to council to talk about how we'd like to see that moving forward. Potentially connecting more regionally with the work that SCTA is doing. We are working, seems like we're always working on bike parking, but we have a few bike racks which we are about to place, knowing that the public has been asking for additional bike parking for a while. We just started the process of selecting a consultant, again, through the very similar funding program with SCTA on a Safe Routes to School plan. We have completed the county has completed a Vision Zero plan. We wish to continue to work on our sidewalk maintenance and looking for funding for the shuttle. We are continuing to work with SCT to make the improvements on the Route 67 and the potential of adding another route. And of course, our collaboration with SMART to bring a multi-use path across the bridge. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about funding at the beginning, and this is a list of grant funding that we currently are currently using on projects. That is a pretty good list, and there are other grants out there. Staff continues to look at every grant that comes through to see if it's possible for us to apply and be successful and have the match funding available to move forward. So rest assured, we are always looking at ways to fund all projects, and we'll do the same for this active transportation plan. Next slide, please. One of the big changes of this plan versus the previous is there is a suggested or a required monitoring. So once a year, as we do our general plan updates, we will update how we are moving forward within the active transportation plan. And this is the suggested means or input, along, of course, with the list of projects that we have completed. Next slide, please.
Just to preview what's coming, the draft of the active transportation plan will be available for public comment through November 30th on the SCTA's outreach portal listed here. The draft and public comment instructions can also be found on the Public Works website on the sidebar. After the public review period closes, the project team will prepare a final draft of the plan to be presented to City Council for adoption in early 2025. Next slide. And to restate the City Council action, we received presentation regarding the draft active transportation plan for the City of Healdsburg, provide input on draft content. The draft will be available online for public comment and will remain open for public comment through November 30th, 2024. And staff will return to City Council with the final active transportation plan for adoption in early 2025. Next slide.
Opening it up to any questions.
Thank you. That's a very good presentation. It's exciting to see all the various items that we've discussed in the past and been presented with, all kind of consolidated in there, and it's great to see that. All right, let's start with questions. Councilmember Edwards.
It's nice to see the breakdown on the comfort level, to see that small, fearless group in there. However, I am concerned about the sidewalks. Seeing a lot of them lately. I know we have an inspection program, but is there a database that's kept on sidewalk issues?
There is. So over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we have, through a contractor, gone out and you see all the shaved side. When they're doing that, they are doing GPS points and photos of everything that they can't do. And so we have that. We have completed a project or two. We have one that's really close to going out to bid, but it isn't everything. We know that there is quite a few sidewalk issues out there. Some of them are very big and expensive. Some of them are just cumulatively big. So we are continuing to work on that, trying to identify funding. There isn't a lot. We are using TDA 3 grant money for the project that's upcoming, and that will pretty much exhaust the budget that we have out of that grant.
And then the other thing I noticed about making it walk is vegetation over the sidewalks. There are some sections of sidewalk where you literally have to crunch down to get through that sidewalk, particularly when there's only a sidewalk on one street. Are we notifying residents that they need to be aware of trimming the vegetation?
We are. That's a much easier question to answer. Notify Public Works of the location. We don't actively go out and inspect. It is on a complaint-driven basis. And so if someone calls Public Works, what we do is we make sure that it is private property and it's not ours or, another agency that we need to contact. We notify the owner and give them some time to be able to cut that back.
Okay, so a resident can contact your department.
Yes,
with that.
please do.
I won't be doing
and
that.
we take care of it, and it'll 2-3 weeks depending on how the private owner responds. Sometimes it takes longer, but it always gets done.
Okay, and then as we're looking at these bike paths and bike boulevards, is that going to be? Are you looking in the project budget for potholes and rough surfaces, because that can affect somebody who's not, who may be using a bicycle but is not like at that fearless level?
It definitely. And part of the ATP has some costs associated with it. They're very generic. And for that very reason, I was questioning whether or not they should be included, because striping is one thing, and that is a very important factor. And we look at that on every project we do.
Good. Yeah, I hope when it comes back, that'll be part of this so we can look at it. All right, thank you.
You should just jot down all the addresses And then you can turn them into Larry.
I've just about surveyed all sidewalks in the street.
There's a lot of us out there right now, so we can, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions. You talk about matching funding. Do pretty much all the grants that we go after require some level of participation for the city?
Most of them, the big ones do, like the TDA 3 that we had talked about, it does not, but again, it's a much smaller dollar value. When you start talking about the, forgive me for using ATP, Active Transportation Program, as opposed to plan for Healdsburg Avenue, it was a pretty hefty match from percentage wise and dollar value because the size of the grant was big. So it becomes restrictive sometimes which grants we can apply to if we don't have adequate match money is all the point I was trying to make.
That makes sense. So the Complete Streets project that we do have the money for, as I recall, when you were showing us that the bike lanes were the protected bike lanes, it's 2 lanes, it was like the top dollar?
Yes, it
bike
most
lanes?
likely, we're going to be bringing this to council in the not too distant future. As the pretty drawing that I showed you back then, it was a lot of landscaped area between the bike lane and the through lane. It's most likely going to be a combination of the two, the protected or the separated, where there's maybe some type of delineator at certain areas. But yes, they would all be separated for the bulk of that from Powell going north up to a certain point, then it switches to a bike lane.
So this whole program that you're presenting to us tonight is very comprehensive and impressive and a lot. I think you estimate $69 million to try to do everything, which is also a lot. Mostly, and it seems a lot like it's mostly bike paths, bike lanes and that, and a little bit of the pedestrian stuff in my mind. And I have to say, my husband's a cyclist, and before he goes out for a ride, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, but say, I love you, don't die. So it's sort of our joke. Like now, if I don't say that to him, he might, but so I know how important that is. So I do worry about that, but then I also see there's a lot of sidewalk and street crossings as a pedestrian that are extremely dangerous. And I go on them a lot when I'm running one night. And there's one on, it's Lupine and March. When I cross I'm crossing March, and there's cars parked along there. And I always picture some of these TV shows that I see where somebody walks out into the street and gets hit by a bus, So I'm always really careful to look around and see that several times. So there is a sidewalk or a crosswalk there, but students are going to school, they're crossing there to go to school, high school. So I guess I just like to say, I see that one is on the list, or no, Johnson is on the list, Johnson and Powell, which is also
Yeah, that's a funded
dangerous.
project.
Yeah, so I'd like to see the one Lupine at March as well beefed up a little bit. But just in general, I think the walking part is a little bit dangerous in town.
So in the plan there, as it pointed out, we have a lot of sidewalk gap closures, which is a big thing because people tend to go out to the street. There are quite a bit of crossing the map. They were mostly on the more major streets. And additionally, outside of the plan, there's a new law where the limits parking at the corners, which can help with some of that visibility. But we can look at any individual, when we do it on a pretty regular basis, look at the individual intersections for sight distances and if parking needs to be pulled back. But I have Lupine and March on my notes.
Thank you. I'll stay alive for longer. Thank you very much.
All right, Councilmember Herod.
Thank you. Two questions. You mentioned that, well, let me just say first that thank you for this plan. It's really comprehensive, and thanks for all the input from the community that went into it. There's a lot of passion for this in our community, and I want to reflect on Sunday morning. I was downtown, and this bright future, I kind of got a glimpse of it because everybody was out walking because it was going to be super hot that day. And so the morning we saw people on bikes and the sidewalks were full, and I was like, this is really where we want to be, in a general way. And we have we have a city that's kind of perfect for it in a lot of ways, and we've made some progress. So it's good to recognize that. And I want to build on that. I want to do it in soon. I think should be one of our early steps is just to promote this lifestyle change, the behavior change. I mean, I'm thinking of the Move Healdsburg rides. I went on a couple of them, haven't been able to go recently, but those really helped me reacquaint myself with my bike, and it was really transformative. And I can see that could be the case for a lot of people. That's just one example. And so you mentioned you had some concerns about your outreach, and that you were getting help, and that wasn't a strong point. But I would just encourage you to put effort into that aspect of it, to sell biking and walking as a way to improve your life and improve the city, improve the earth, and that interest within our community is going to help to move this whole process along. I think in general, just to have more people get on board with these changes. So that's a little bit of feedback, but also a question, I suppose, if you have any sense of where you could improve on that, I'd like to hear about that. And I have one more question if you want to address that.
I have ideas, but the time and or money to implement and getting willing partners is the difficult part. I have already reached out to Sonoma County Bike Coalition to try to expand to the schools, because I've experienced that in other cities, and that's really helpful when they educate the kids on how to ride, and they have fix-it clinics, and so that their bikes are working properly. It's great, and it really helps increase it with the youth, which will carry on hopefully later on.
Yeah.
And the city is certainly equipped to do these types of events, but we do a lot of events, and again, the staff, the timing would be really helpful to have advocates from the community take the lead on some of that. And we have great groups right now, so hopefully we can encourage what Move has been doing. Those rides are a perfect example of a great way to get people out on their bikes.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's easier to get the kids on the bikes than it is to get us old guys on the bikes. But so good luck with that. But so yeah, I want to encourage that aspect of it. So yeah, you mentioned time and money, and you mentioned a couple of different ways in which that different aspects of this plan will move forward. People feel a lot of passion for this, want to know, and I want to know at what points are we going to be most effective at pressing forward the priority of these projects when there's other competing projects. We want to have a chance to look at those and stand up and write letters and talk to the city, talk to the city council. I'm speaking on behalf of the community, of course, but also for myself, I want to know at what juncture are we going to be able to press this forward. I think of, our budget planning that we do, and goal setting are kind of obvious answers to that. But I think any input you can provide along those lines would be great, because part of what you mentioned was like a lot of the stuff we can go back to the plan when we have the funding. We can go back to the plan when there's development, and that's great. And I'm sure that we have the motivation and the leadership to make sure that happens. But I'm sure there's a lot of times where it's going to be helpful for people who feel passionate about this to be able to push it forward.
My only answers are the obvious ones that you've already given. And like I said, we have been very successful, and we're going to continue our efforts towards grant funding. And there is some opportunities within that process to definitely weigh in on the project, but sometimes weigh in on what that project is. Often, we as staff have to pick what we're most likely to be successful on, because going through the grant process can be really onerous, and we know what it takes to be successful. And so we kind of have to occasionally fit that project to match the grant, as opposed to, this is my most important project. It may not fit the grant as well as something else. But
Councilmember,
there's always process.
Sorry to interrupt. I want to offer one kind of a different perspective on that question. I think it's a good question. One thing I think I lose track of sometimes is we are in the midst of, I was going to say two, it's really pursuing three enormously, for us, complex and expensive transportation projects between Grove Street, Healdsburg Avenue, and really March Ave, which we've added to. Now, all of those, I think, fit into what we're talking about. Those,
Oh, absolutely.
to varying degrees, there are huge multimodal components, but just in the context of our budget for a city of our size, for Healdsburg Avenue, where we got this massive grant, even so, the local match is just kind of strangling out all of our ability to do other transportation projects. I don't think we need to feel bad about that or apologize for that. These are great transformative. But I do think we're just in a moment in time. It's going to be a hard moment when these things are actually under construction in some ways, where just a ton of dollars are going to a very small number of projects. And that's probably going to be true for another couple of years. But in my experience, a more normal time for a city is maybe you have one project of that magnitude going on. And when we get to that point, plus our team doing what they do and going out and chasing grants and all of that, I think you'll see a lot more of those smaller intersections and gap closures and some things like that. I'm not suggesting we won't do them all right now, right? You just heard about a crosswalk that's coming. But I just think it's helpful to remember that we've got, for our scope, some really kind of gargantuan projects.
I hear you, and thank you for that. And I just want to kind of mention that there's always a concern with these plans that they lose steam and they get dusty over time. And I have confidence in the leadership and the motivation here, and I think there's a lot of momentum on our side. And part of what you're talking about supports that view. I'm glad to see that we're going to get annual updates, and I just want to make sure that we see this as a long-term investment of time and interest and energy, and so that we don't lose steam on this, because a lot of people do feel that this is something that we want to tackle with some urgency. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly?
Thanks. It's exciting to be seeing the plan and appreciate all the work that you and community members have put in to get it to this point. And I was curious about some of the outreach components, but I guess I'm wondering, the areas where we talk about no sidewalks, like the Rivers Bend neighborhood, or when Montage was doing Pasalacqua Drive, are we still allowing future streets to be developed with no sidewalks? Is that a policy that the city allows or promotes?
Other than Pasalacqua Road, I'm not aware of anything that has come through in quite some time.
I'm curious, I think about some of the undeveloped areas of town where we may see future development, and this is obviously because, as City Manager Kay mentioned, we've got some really big projects that are about to kind of break ground, and I imagine we'll be really focused on those for the considerable future. But this plan, will have very long-ranging impact, I imagine, and it'll kind of guide our active transportation, our non-car oriented ways to get around for maybe the next generation of development in Healdsburg. And so I wonder why we would allow for, to allow a street, if down the road there's future development and streets are coming in, can we set a standard that streets are required to have sidewalks, period? And that if people want to have, a development standard that gets changed, that they have to present some sort of overriding consideration to allow for that, to not have a sidewalk?
We do. That is the standard. There are some exceptions. So, like, for an example, if you're going to do a building permit to make improvements on your property over a certain value, you're going to need to upgrade. So if you've got a sidewalk that's in poor shape, you're going to repair it. If you're missing sidewalk, you're going to replace it. And the same would hold for new development. They're going to put in sidewalk. There are some exceptions. If the sidewalk is not going to connect to anything and is unlikely to connect anything for a long time, again, you start thinking going out on the east side of town where there's maybe sidewalk on one side and there isn't on the other. It's built out. There are exceptions where we would not force a property owner or a developer to build something that isn't going to get used and is going to be out of place. However, in most cases, we don't know that. And if we are planning for sidewalk to go in there, they will be required to do it. And it may be piecemeal and it may be decades before that sidewalk connects. So there are some exceptions, but in generally that is the case. They are required to put in sidewalk.
Great. I remember, that's great to hear. And I think, something we should certainly continue to implement. I know, we've been hearing from folks at Enzo Village that they're walking on Aqua Drive across the street and they're like, why do I have to walk in the middle of the road? Where are the sidewalks? And it's like, well, we didn't ask Montage said we want it to feel like a country road out here in town, so we aren't going to put in sidewalks. And I know we'll have that multi-use pathway done at some point that'll connect up to the open space. But I do have concerns about how dark it is over there and people walking in the street, especially our future residents at the affordable housing site at Saggio Hills, and then also our seniors and affordable housing residents at North Village. So. I'm curious about the street parking standards. So similar to requiring sidewalks when people are putting in new streets, which I understand we don't put in new streets very often. When we're putting in new streets, do we require that do we prioritize street parking for cars? Is that something that we continue to push forward with?
Well, I think I'm glad that I have Kurt here, who can maybe answer that better than I can. Kurt manages the development process for the city, so he sees it all firsthand.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Kurt Bates with Public Works. So yes, our street standards that are in place do require on-street parking. And there are some instances where we may allow one side of the street only to have on-street parking, such as if you're in a hillside area and maybe one side of the street is not developed and the other side of the street is developed. So we do have subdivisions like that. But your typical subdivision, let's say, where you have homes on both sides of the street, our standards do require on-street parking on both sides.
And why is that? Do we require a bike lane on both sides? Obviously not, because we just saw the map. I'm not trying to grill you. I just mean,
Yeah.
we have this ethos of we have to put private car parking on all of our public streets, but we don't prioritize bicycles or, to protect that type of transportation, but we do it for cars to be parked there.
Right. So we do require bike lanes where the current bicycle and pedestrian advisory plan says so. So on the larger streets, the collector streets, the arterial streets, some of the routes where the larger streets connect, it is a requirement for a bike lane. On the residential streets, so smaller streets, less traffic, lower speeds, we do not require a bike lane. So it would be a share the road situation like Director Zimmer was talking about earlier.
And if we wanted, so I know when we're looking at this plan, one of the major considerations that we keep talking about is we could put in protected bike lanes or buffered lanes, but we have to maintain the on-street parking for private cars to park on our public streets. And so it seems as though we're constantly dealing with that tension if we only have a certain width of the right of way. And we've already committed our minds to requiring parking for those private vehicles to just live on our public street empty, sitting there while there's active transportation wanting to happen. And we put those bicycles in the middle of the street where there's cars going by because we've prioritized the parking for the cars. Is there a way to kind of undo that method, that way we think about it, so that we can prioritize active transportation?
It is certainly something council can try to move forward with because we, public works engineers have gone through this many times. When you take away parking, particularly when you take away a significant amount of parking, the community is not happy with it. The people who live there are not happy with it. And it does become a fight. And it's a balance that council needs to strike as far as removing existing parking. When it comes to new development, as residential, low speed, low volume, there isn't necessarily the need. I think most people would see a bigger benefit to allowing parking. So when you have people over or whatever that is, they would see more benefit in that because the benefit of adding a bike lane on a low speed, low volume road, there isn't a lot of benefit there. If we were going to be designing a city from scratch right now, all of the major streets would have bike lanes. I mean, it would be a requirement. But as it is now, we have this existing infrastructure. And so, as Kurt said, the developers are required to put bike lanes in where our plan says we need to, or where it's connecting to a bike lane, or if it just makes sense, it will get added. But we've got an existing width, and if council chooses to reduce parking to allow more bike lanes, as we went through on the slides, there's the opportunity to enhance.
Yeah, I think also when you look at it on like a project by project basis and you're bringing every project forward and then each project becomes oh, I know the guy who lives there, he's really not going to be happy about losing his on-street parking. That's a different way to approach a holistic issue within a city. And so I think from this active transportation plan and from that global view, it would seem like this is the time to have that conversation around how do we want to prioritize active transportation within our city so it doesn't have to be on a project, but we want to make sure people can safely, get around our town. So I do think, the standards that we apply holistically need to be really looked at and not on a project by project basis. That seems like what we do for the way we design other things, not related to active transportation, but just kind of holistically about the type of city we want to live in. Same thing with the residential sidewalk standards. So we have a 6-foot sidewalk standard in most residential neighborhoods and it's 5 foot and 8 foot near commercial. Is that, sorry?
The city street standards are 5 foot throughout the city. There may be some areas that have a specific plan that have a call for a wider sidewalk, but generally speaking, it's 5 feet.
And
Like
how
on
much do we?
Mill, there's wider sidewalks where they make sense too, through the same process, through the development process, planning commission, staff, council weigh in on that. And some places we put in wider sidewalk.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that with like street utility poles in the sidewalk and other, impediments that sometimes that 5 foot width is even tighter.
But as we move forward with projects, that is not an acceptable design now. That is old and it gets changed as we move forward. So no one would be allowed to do that on current development. And it's been that way for a while. So whenever you're seeing the light pole right in the middle of the sidewalk, that is not acceptable anymore.
Great to hear. Is there a way we can widen our sidewalk standard to create more public space for pedestrians?
We certainly could. The Farron Pierce draft of this originally had a 6-foot change and a 6-foot standard for sidewalk, and we took it out because if we require a 6-foot standard now, when someone is building adjacent to 5 foot on both sides, they're going to have one lot with a 6 foot. It goes back to, we have this existing infrastructure. We certainly could change that as a standard and use judgment on when it doesn't make sense. If council so chooses, that is a perfect comment to add to the plan. Again, staff took it out because it didn't seem to make sense to us, but if you're building for 50 years out, maybe it does.
Great. And then I know when we did the SDAT process, when the American Institute of Architects came to Healdsburg and they really looked at what are the challenges of our community back in 2018, I think it was. And one of the things they really talked about was connectivity. And they had folks who looked specifically at not just like where are people biking now and where do people live and like, hey, fix the sidewalk in front of my house, but more destination oriented. How do you get from a specific place to another place? Like how do you get from the junior high to the park where the kids hang out and then to Starbucks where they go after they leave school? And are we looking at did we look at the connectivity component of the SDAT for this plan?
We included a lot of plans, as I'm sure Erin would probably nod her head, that she was required to look at and understand before putting this plan together. We did not include the SDAT. And so that is a great comment, and we certainly will go through it to make sure that it we did go through that similar exercise of, in general, saying here's where people are coming from. Here's your residential area. It is relatively safe to ride or walk, and where they want to go, and trying to create those connections as best we could with the facilities that we have. And that was one of the diagrams in the presentation showing how we filled out where the existing map is to what we're looking for in the future.
Great. How did we do outreach in Spanish to our Spanish speaking community on this plan?
We certainly did. I don't know if Erin or Michael can speak better to what was included. I don't think we had Spanish only presentation, but we had translators at multiple of them.
Yeah, we did a community event at the community center in June, and we had translation services there for Fear and Pierce's outreach, I believe.
Sorry, I know you guys are doing great outreach. Did any participate? Maybe that's the question. How good was the participation of our Spanish speaking population? I have the same question about seniors as well. I want to answer both.
There were, but for the community event, the translation services didn't end up being utilized. Something we can definitely improve on.
Yeah, minimal participation from the Spanish speaking population, but we did have translation and interpretation available. And then the follow-up question,
how about engagement with seniors and having seniors participate in providing input? How did that go?
We didn't necessarily collect information on people's ages, but observationally, I would say we had individuals who represented the senior population consistently engaged throughout the process.
Great. Yeah, I think in the timeline between now and the adoption in November, I mean, just knowing firsthand how many of our immigrant community who are the Spanish speakers in our community who don't have cars, I mean, the ATP is like their main mode of getting from place to place. So having their input in this plan, I think, is really critical. So maybe there's a way. I know we have a contract with Corazon. Dana's coming up to help you out. A contract with Corazon too that we do outreach with for other departments, and maybe that would be an opportunity to do outreach to our Spanish speaking population in partnership with them.
Yeah. Hi. Hello, good evening, Council. This has been a very long process, and I think that we've done a number of events. So one that I just wanted to remind everyone of is the Housing Resources Fair that took place last fall, and we actually had a fluent Spanish speaker there and who communicated with, I believe, almost all of the people who came up to that event, to their booth at that event, were Spanish speakers.
Great. And I think also the school population too. I mean, that there's obviously a lot of overlap, but I think knowing, communicating and getting input at school sites or with the schools is always a great way to find out like where kids coming and going from and their families on bikes. I know I'm getting close to the end, guys. Sorry. I did want to reiterate, I think that March Avenue at Lupine Crossing is one of the most dangerous pedestrian crosses in the city. I wanted to echo the Vice Mayor's comments on that we've seen a lot of close calls. I don't know if it's like a bulb out with a crosswalk that's lit, but it's very sketchy, and it is that main crossing from all those neighborhoods on the north end of town across March to get to the school sites in downtown. And then I think you'd mentioned Director Zimmer about the SMART train pathway, and I'm curious what's the status of like moving towards design or moving towards implementation on the section of the Foss Creek pathway that's technically the SMART path as it comes through town, from the community center at Grove Street, at the north end of the community center up to the north end of town. I know that that was called for in the Foss Creek pathway plan, and I don't know if that's something that SMART is going to move forward with or what happens now.
I don't believe SMART is moving forward at this time. They are adamant they are going to Cloverdale, and the multi-use path will extend that entire length at some point, but when that is, we don't know. We've looked at it, and so where the Foss Creek Grove, there will be a good connection to Healdsburg Avenue, where we have the protected then onto standard bike lanes and good walkways for that length. And so that will continue to the end of city limits. I know different than a class 1 path along the tracks, but there will be safe access for bikes and pedestrians up to the north city limits through those 2 separate projects.
And is SMART pathway, the class 1 pathway, should they get the grant that they just applied for through MTC to Geyserville, which we'll find out about in I think 2 or 3 weeks. If that happens, are they still planning to do a class 1 pathway that would extend the Foss Creek pathway north?
I am almost certain they are. Almost, he's almost certain too, but not quite there.
So we decided to put bicycles on Healdsburg Avenue instead of doing what partially protected, but when you get to the bend over the creek, then we'll go to bicycles on the road on Healdsburg Avenue instead of having the class 1 all the way to North Village and beyond.
Correct. And again, in my mind, it's interim until the SMART train goes north of town.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much.
All right, I will withhold everything else until after the public who's been sitting patiently here. So at this point, I would like to open up public comment on this item. So if anybody wants to share your feedback, welcome. Just make sure that little green, or the button's not green, but the light is green. Okay, then you're good.
Okay, there we go.
There.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Turk, and I am one of the volunteers from the community who was on the committee that helped guide and create the active transportation plan. So as you heard, we've been working on it for more than a year, and we spent a lot of time on it and getting all those tiered projects in, because we really believe that this is a vision for the future. So despite City Manager Kay kind of pouring a big cold glass of water on the projects actually happening, I still see this as an important document to create the city that we want to live in. And that's one, like Councilmember Harrod mentioned, that people are walking around, seeing each other, seeing their neighbors, being slow, being safe, where kids can go, where people who don't drive can get around safely around the city, where seniors who aren't able to drive anymore can get around the city. So this is of ultra importance to my family and many others like mine. I wanted to say that on the parking topic, I believe that there might be hard decisions that have to be made about getting rid of on-street parking for some of these projects to happen. And that if you're wondering, Council, if there's people out there who are happy to get rid of street parking in order for bike lanes to go in, there are many of us, and it's something that we need to think about for the future. It's not the best use of space. It's not sharing the space for the public if some of the public isn't driving. I also wanted to say, to kind of bring it back to Measure O, which I know the council is in full support of, and I am as well, and I plan to vote to support yes. That is a project that sees a vision of the city of having high density, multi-use housing where people can get around in active transportation. So having this active transportation plan and implementing these measures to get people around the city, it goes hand in hand. It's super important as we're designing, as Director Zimmer said. Imagine that we're planning for 50 years in the future. We are. So these are decisions that we trust you now to make that will allow us to live these lives that we all enjoy and not dying when we're out on the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy, welcome.
Okay, the green light is on. So I'm Judy Fujita. I'm a member of Move Healdsburg, Climate Action Healdsburg, and I am on the City of Healdsburg Active Transportation Planning Committee. The ATP, the Active Transportation Plan, is an excellent compilation of projects that can expand active transportation in Healdsburg. But at this point, it doesn't present us with a blueprint for meeting the active transportation goals that the City Council has already approved as part of the climate mobilization strategy. The climate mobilization strategy has as one of its goals increasing the share of active transportation modes to 15% by 2030. The active transportation plan needs to prioritize projects to achieve this goal. We need to come up with a short list of projects in addition to those that have already been approved, meaning Healdsburg Avenue, Grove Street, in the next few years. I would recommend prioritizing projects promoting active transportation to and from schools, to and from senior aging facilities, and to and from the future transit hub at the SMART train station. I would additionally prioritize well-marked bicycle routes through the city to include north-south and east-west routes, which would be usable by not just cyclists with extensive experience riding in traffic and on streets with large potholes, but by our community of cyclists, including children and the majority of adults who cycle in Healdsburg, who are of the opinion that the streets of Healdsburg are not safe for cyclists. I would additionally prioritize bicycle parking projects and fixing sidewalks. I would also point out that Healdsburg is a major hub for bicyclists, and its impact on local tourism is not mentioned in the active transportation plan. Hundreds of bike touring groups ride through Healdsburg each year. The lack of safe infrastructure for cycling in Healdsburg in comparison to other cities in Sonoma, Napa, Mendocino, and Marin counties could adversely affect this impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. My name's John Dilworth. I'm a resident of Enso Village. When I was young, I was a very active bicyclist. I was one of those 1% really courageous cyclists. But as a result of a couple of unfortunate mishaps, I've given up bicycling because I won't do it when I'm with the cars. When we considered coming to Enso Village, I was looking forward to the possibility of getting back on a bicycle again because it looked like there was a possibility of there being good bicycle paths and dedicated bike lanes in the area, but there aren't. So I'm not back on a bicycle. When I come into town, I go to the Park Point gym, for instance, I drive my car. I'd love to ride a bike if there were a dedicated bike path from up there down, but that's not the situation. It also disturbs me that Enso Village is full of very physically active people and many people out walking at all kinds of times of day. But it's very difficult to walk very far from Enso Village without angling with traffic. Plaza Lacqua, for instance, which was mentioned earlier, you see people walking up the street with cars and trucks whizzing by all the time. And the alternative is to walk through the weeds with the ticks next to the road. It's kind of an unfortunate situation. So I urge you all to do whatever you can to put pressure on expediting remedies to these situations. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi there. My name is Randy Johnson. I run Getaway Adventures. We're a bike touring center here in Hillsburg. And I'm also a member of Move Hillsburg, which is this advocacy group that Judy has mentioned. And basically, we've been doing these rides now, what, half a dozen over the last year or so. And it's interesting to see the mix of people. We have opened it up to the Hispanic community to come out and try it. And it's fun to see these kids get out there and really enjoy the ride. They have a good time with it. But then when you ask them, do you want to continue to use a bike and get to and from school or play? No, don't want to do it. It's too dangerous in this town. And that's really sad. That's a sad state of affairs for people. Honestly, there's a way to do this. Chris, you mentioned let's not let this steam kind of get out of this particular project, because it's really a key thing for not only the young people, but also everybody in the community. So I would urge you to really prioritize this thing. Don't let the steam out of this particular project, as you eloquently said. And I hope that you know, this is going to be something that will last us for many, many years. 50+ years would be the way I'd look at it. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Brian Gagan. I live at 320 Hayden Street, and I also volunteer with Move. I want to speak in support of this, the draft active transportation plan. Project manager Michael Harrigan, the Citizen Committee, and Fair and Peers consultants have worked hard on this project, and they have produced a good draft. This draft will, of course, need some tweaking, and more clarity will be needed in prioritizing the most impactful and achievable projects. But on whole, the projects noted in this document would be transformational for Healdsburg. So many benefits accrue from this type of infrastructure: improvements in our environment and in our health, better opportunity for social engagement, beautification of our streets, and an invigoration of our local economy. People-friendly streets and pedestrian areas embody the ideals of equity and can be enjoyed by all. This plan will also be a perfect companion piece to our climate mobilization strategy and could help meet many of its goals, most notably the laudable measure to achieve 15% active transportation in Healdsburg by 2030. I hope that when this plan is complete, you will embrace it as an essential document in planning a more livable, attractive, and prosperous Healdsburg. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Oh. Welcome.
Welcome. My name is Doug Lyle. I'm also part of the Move Healdsburg. I did not come here intending to speak tonight, but I do have something I'd like to say. I'm an active cyclist. I'm one of the 1%ers. I ride all over town. I ride all over the area. I would say from the roundabout up to around Piper Street, for me, is one of the worst places almost I've ever ridden. And I used to live in Berkeley. So I just don't trust tourists and people with their cars, their lack of attention and things like that. And when I came here tonight, I thought there was probably zero possibility, even in my heart, that Healdsburg Avenue could ever be changed from that direction, from that distance that I mentioned, because things like Valencia in San Francisco, we all know what happened in the Mission, if you're aware of it. They put in bike lanes. All the merchants absolutely went berserk over the fact that they lost their parking, their businesses suffered from it. And there was now a huge effort to stop the bike lanes and put it back where the parking is. But unlike the Mission, we do have other places to park in Healdsburg. People may have to walk an extra block. And I think that, as our first speaker said, and I forgot her name already because I'm old and I have gray hair. I think when we look at the future of Healdsburg and trying to make this for people that come here and want to rent a bike from, you know, the e-bike shops in town, from Randy and his company, people that want to just come up here and bike, like Judy said, all these people that bring their bikes to the area that want to go out to the wineries, if they could go up Healdsburg Avenue safely, I think the small price that the merchants pay, that they might not have people be able to park right in front of their spot, but the customers have to walk a block or two to get there. I think the long-term future for Healdsburg is much brighter for this initiative that we're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Emily Sharton. I'm with the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. And thanks, first of all, to the city for creating a committee to be involved in this process. I think it's really critical to have that input and expertise from residents. And it's also been really helpful for the committee to be able to meet with city staff and consultants through the process. One of the topics, of course, that came up repeatedly was the need for a connected low-stress network that is safe and accessible for all users. And we can't stress enough how important that is, not only the plan, but the timely build out of that network. People really simply need to be able to get where they need to go, whether it's to school or work or shopping. There's nothing more frustrating than a bike lane that just ends. So, of course, we understand that the larger scale projects like Healdsburg Ave and Grove Street are taking a lot of time and resources. But what's really important is building out safe connections across the city and through neighborhoods. The Bike Coalition is definitely concerned about the number of Class 3 bike routes and bike boulevards being recommended in this plan. Again, you're asking bikes and vehicles to share the same travel lane, which for many riders is just not a low-stress situation. So you've heard from staff tonight that there are opportunities to enhance some of these projects and look at installing actual bike lanes in many cases. Thanks to Councilmember Kelly for bringing up the idea of looking at on-street parking from a citywide perspective rather than approaching this on a project-by-project basis. Certainly we appreciate this is likely a very difficult discussion. But again, the goal of this plan is really to find ways to improve the safety of everyone who is using that public right-of-way. I wanted to highlight just one action item that's mentioned kind of lower down in the report, and that references quick builds, which are pretty much what they sound like. These are temporary projects that allow a community to test out a new piece of infrastructure, like a bike lane or a roundabout, before it becomes permanent. These have been used in other jurisdictions in Sonoma County, and we hope that this will become a tool in Healdsburg as the plan is implemented. And lastly, I just wanted to also flag bike parking, which is listed as a broad policy goal, again, sort of towards the end of the report. We would recommend, more specific language about installing bike parking downtown and how that might be achieved. Thanks.
Thank you. Kathy, welcome.
I'm an avid bicyclist. You may see me all through town. One of my main questions is, are you guys going to put in bike lanes in the roundabout? Yeah, no. And for safety riding on Fitch, I live on Fitch and Piper Street, right where a bottlenecks. If you remove one side for parking, it will make the street a little wider and safe for not just bicycling emergencies. It's a very narrow street. Now we got North Street, Fitch to East Street. One side is no parking because the street is too small to have parking on both sides. But the thing, if you put a bike lane down Fitch Street, if you put it on the side that the school's on, St. John's, during when school gets out, you got people parking. Then you got the parents just pulling around to pick up the students, so they're double and triple parking into Fitch Street in Matheson. So I don't know how you're going to figure that out. And one thing I would like to see improvement on the roundabout is flashers put in, so when you're going to cross, because sometimes they don't stop for you when you're trying to cross the street in front of rock pile. If you're on the bike, if you're smart, you don't go through the roundabout. Cars won't stop half the time. And there's one bad thing, if I got time really quick, one time I rode my bike from Santa Rosa to Healdsburg. I got it fixed down there. I tried some of the bike lanes. I thought they were nuts. Not only do you have to watch cars passing you, you got to make sure nobody's going to open the door on you or pull out in front of you. And they want to check especially there at Lakewood Drive where the cars are going to go up to the freeway and the bike lanes right there. Nope, they just don't stop. They just go right past you. And so you got to rethink some of these bike lanes and some of these routes. And some of it's very dangerous. You don't want to put one down Johnson Street. I learned to ride my bike down that street as a child. There's just something you can't do. So thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Ira, welcome. So you and Mark deciding who's going to speak first. Welcome.
Council members and city staff. My name is Ty Benoit, and I'm going to make two sets of comments tonight. One is as an individual and also one as representing the leadership group of Climate Action Healdsburg. Tomorrow is an important day in our family history. It's the day that really caused us to move to Healdsburg. We lost our house in the Tubbs fire. I know you all know this. And we decided we would move to a bikeable, walkable community. At that point, we went from the 60% on that chart to the 32% that gave up our bikes because we didn't feel it was safe in this town to ride. We're not like Judy and Norm Fujita. We're not in the 1%. So I'm imploring you to consider all the aspects of this active transportation and would strongly support the idea of taking parking away so that Stephanie's daughter or Heather's children could ride in a safer environment. So those are my personal comments. This is on behalf of Climate Action Healdsburg, and you can see how our numbers have grown. We have around 300 members on our group, and Move Healdsburg is part of us. And you can see that there are a lot of other new people that have come in who are very involved in this active transportation. So you received a letter from me on behalf of the leadership team. This was written collaboratively, and I'd just like to say a couple of things publicly so that it gets into the public record. We're grateful for the development of this plan. And as you know, 40% of all emissions are the result of private vehicle trips of under 2 miles, which can most readily be replaced by these active modes of transit. And as you well know, the climate mobilization strategy sets a goal of increasing the share of active transportation to 15%. A number of people have said that tonight. But we do want to integrate. We want to hope that you will take the ATP implementation and integrate it into the overall climate mobilization strategy. And we believe that it falls short of an actionable plan, that in order to make sure that it doesn't become a dust catcher, we would like to have the following elements included into the planning document. Baseline data on active transportation in Healdsburg, SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. We should recognize and reference specific climate mobilization strategy, active transportation goals, and in general, greenhouse gas emissions reduction should be included as a key consideration in prioritizing these active transportation projects. So in conclusion, Climate Action Healdsburg regards the ATP as critically important for implementing the climate mobilization strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Hagley, council members. I'm Mark McMullen from Parkland Farms. I'd like to start with a question because I think this was brought up in the presentation. This will be replacing the 2009 Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, which I believe was included as the circulation portion of the general plan update in 2009. Will this be included when we do our general plan update as the circulation piece? That's my question. As a Healdsburg resident who relies on multiple forms of transit daily, I appreciate the effort to improve the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in our city. However, I believe the active transportation plan falls short of addressing our holistic transit needs and meeting the ambitious goals set forth in the climate mobilization strategy. While the ATP provides a framework for enhancing the bike lanes and the sidewalks, it fails to consider how these improvements integrate with our existing public transit options. Sonoma County Transit 67 local shuttle and the 60 regional bus are vital services to residents, workers, and visitors. Yet there's no mention of how the bike and pedestrian projects will connect to these routes or improve accessibility. Furthermore, the plan lacks concrete policies for secure bicycle parking throughout the city. As someone who hesitates to use my personal bike for riding trips due to lack of safe overnight parking, I can attest to how critical this infrastructure is for encouraging cycling as a viable transportation option. The ATP also misses an opportunity to address traffic calming measures, which are essential for creating safer streets to all users. Simple, cost-effective solutions like painted bulb outs at high traffic intersections could significantly improve safety for pedestrians and cyclists. And perhaps the most concerning is the lack of planning for the future smart train stop, which is set to open within 5 years. We need a comprehensive vision for an intermodal hub that seamlessly connects SMART with our local buses, the Amtrak bus, and our active transportation options. To truly reduce our reliance on personal vehicles and meet our climate goals, we need a more ambitious, integrated approach to transit planning. This should include exploring microtransit options to fill the gaps in our current system, reimagining the 67 shuttle route to better serve our residents and workers, developing a clear plan for secure bicycle parking throughout the city, and creating the intermodal transit hub centered around the future SMART station. While the ATP is a step in the right direction, I urge council to consider these broader transit needs as we move forward. By taking a more holistic approach, we can create a truly accessible, sustainable transportation system that serves all of Healdsburg's residents, workers, and visitors. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Good evening, council members and staff. And my name is Seishin Holden. I'm a resident of Enzo Village and a member of Move Healdsburg. I appreciate your endurance. I think it's a wonderful idea to solidify the north-south bikeways and the east-west bikeways to make a total transportation, active transportation system work and work well. We want to be connected and we want those connections to be continuous, from schools, safe routes to schools and from schools to home. On the topic of parking, I would like to just put out the concept that a bike lane suggests that bikes belong. So if you have parking and if you have a bike lane, people can park in the bike lane if they're going to a dinner party, they're going to a barbecue. I have personally seen cars parked on the side of the road that have spider webs in the wheel wells. It's like kind of permanent storage without any cost. Is that what we want with our public right of ways? So I'm just saying bikes belong. Bike lanes give the message that bikes belong. And I thought tonight was going to be the vote on this ATP. Apparently it's not. That will come later on next year. I'll be sitting on the edge of I'll be sitting on my hands waiting for that to happen. The climate mobilization strategy is a necessary thing, as we can see, just reading the news and even walking outside. And this active transportation plan would be, if it's implemented, if it's adopted, implemented, would be a wonderful move towards that CMS. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening.
Thank you. Richard, welcome.
Good evening again, Council, Mr. Mayor.
I'm quite excited about the ATP. It was my idea to talk to Tom Chambers around 2007 and ask why Healdsburg wasn't one of the League of American Bicyclists bronze, silver, or platinum cities. Since when I moved here, there were still Tour de France teams coming to Healdsburg to train. I really just have some questions. Speed bumps are a way to slow traffic down, even when it appears we can't change speed limits. So I hope we put in lots of speed bumps because we seem to be blocked of changing speed limits. I'm curious about what it's going to take to extend the signal timers for pedestrians at signalized intersections. The slide that showed hands, weight, and a clock certainly are something that city could use to improve the safety of pedestrian crossings at signalized intersections. It was mentioned, but I don't think it needs to be moved up in priority where there are telephone poles in the middle of the sidewalk blocking someone in a wheelchair. Not only that, we seem to have lost our focus on preventing sandwich signs on the sidewalk around the city. This was something that I thought there's an ordinance that prevents it, but we seem to have forgotten that, and the sandwich boards seem to be growing again. None of the slides that showed facilities showed green paint. I think with some planning and design effort, green paint might offer some element of safety in intersections that are challenging now before we can do major design changes, bulb outs, or any of the other opportunities such as bike lanes, protected or otherwise. I am curious how the city will accumulate funds to nibble away at the $69 million that is the total, since we will need, I assume, $34.5 million to be available for the match. Do we have a revenue source, or do we have to take things from other places to do these matches? I grew up in a neighborhood much like the area north of Powell. There were no cars allowed to park overnight on the street.
Richard, your time is up.
That's fine. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Seeing no one else, I will close public comment and bring it back. Before we had a couple of questions, but I just wanted to add a comment that, you know, Richard and Mark, I think, were at the meeting back in 2017, and just the energy and the vibe here is different than it was back then when I think it was it a $500,000 grant that we had to do design work for the Healdsburg Avenue Improvement Project. And it was a battle at council to get, you know, those funds allocated to just even do design so that we're ready to apply for grants. We had members on our council that wanted to just, you know, for Healdsburg Avenue up by Ace Hardware, let's just paint some stripes on the road. That's a much better use of the funds. And the vision that I'm seeing within the community here with the participation and the comments, and also from our council, it's completely different. And I'm sure you guys feel that a little bit tonight. So just wanted to kind of put that in context. So we had a couple of questions about the active transportation plan rolling up into the general plan.
I'm wondering if Director Diven can answer that.
Good evening, Council. I'm not aware of, strange echo in this. of the bike plan actually being part of the circulation plan. It is referenced in the circulation plan. There's an implementation goal to basically to implement the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. So a smart thing to do, and we've already had those discussions, would be to, similar to what we did with the natural hazard mitigation plan, but to incorporate the ATP by reference in the general plan to replace the bicycle and pedestrian master plan language that's in there right now.
Okay.
And of course, a new general plan would open up the door to doing a lot more.
There's a question about speed bumps. Is that for the fire
Yeah.
chief or?
Well, I can answer that probably on behalf of fire. That is not the only negative with speed bumps. I've experienced them in other agencies. They can be really loud for whatever home is next to them. They tend to make the asphalt fail in front or behind them. As you drive around other places where they do have speed bumps, you'll see the potholes right behind them. And then for response time for police and fire, they become very difficult.
Okay. And then there's a question about extending the signal timers. I know there was a question that came up from Enzo Village about the chirping, and I think that got addressed. So there's some
I will take,
adjustments or.
I think I can give a general enough answer. If not, we're very lucky using everyone in the audience today. But yes, there are opportunities to do that. There's give and take, because when you're giving more time to pedestrians, it is slowing down traffic, and we do get a fair amount of complaints. When someone waits 2 more seconds, I get a phone call saying they sat there for 5 minutes. So we do look at that. There are places where we extend it. There is language in the ATP for considering extending the pedestrian walk time as needed.
And then sandwich boards, signs are always my favorite pet peeves. So,
I don't know if I need to bring Scott up, but there is language in our Muni code on sandwich boards. They are allowed under certain circumstances, but you do need to keep the pathway clear. The sidewalk you have to have the 5-foot passage for ADA.
Yeah, and who would enforce it?
Code enforcement.
So take a picture and text the council member.
Sure.
I think there's a phone number for code enforcement, right? We want people to.
Yeah, what's the phone number for people to call?
I do not know code enforcement's phone number.
Well, you can still text your council member. We'll get the.
It's just the police department's number.
Okay, perfect. All right.
One-stop shopping over there.
Yeah. We're a small town. We're all accessible. All right. So I'd like to, so we got a lot of comments from the community, and I like this approach of kind of opening it up. I always have that analogy of, we're making a pizza and this is where we're deciding what toppings are going on versus when it comes out of the oven. And well, there's limited things we can do if we've got a meat lovers pizza coming out and everybody wanted a pesto. So first to the community members that came here and sent your emails, our staff has them. We appreciate your feedback. And then what I'd like to do now is maybe start down here and we'll go down for just kind of council feedback on this. And so Councilmember Edwards, do you want to start?
One of the things that's interesting about the cobwebs on cars is there are a few. I have seen them. We do have an ordinance of how long cars can be parked on a street. So again, that would be a code enforcement number if it's been sitting there for a long time. I think that this is a really good plan to help connect the city on bike racks. And bike racks are really important, I think, because just like parking, if you have to park your bike 3 blocks away from where you're going, I could see that we might downtown utilize a parking space for bike racks because that would make it easier for people to get in going with something like that. But I think it's nice that we have a plan, and it would be, I can see this as easier in a younger city because when our streets were designed, cars were smaller, cars didn't travel as fast. So we're trying to adapt an old city with new new regulations and new modes of transportation. So I hope that we can keep those two aspects in mind when we're trying to merge this. Because I know like on North Street, we have parking on one side, but also what I'm noticing in the neighborhoods is as housing prices go up, there's more cars. Back in 1993, there were very few cars parked on First Street. Now it's just about full every evening from end to end. So I'm concerned how we will work on that and how we can narrow that down. You know, if it's one thing like you have a parking lot outside of town, you could bike home. How we reimagine that. So I think that's some of the things I'd like to look at going forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
Really appreciate all the feedback and participation tonight at our council meeting. I don't think we've had this many public commenters in a very long time. So thank you so much for coming and participating. And it's also great to see our new Enzo Village residents participating. So welcome to town, and we hope you come back and participate on other efforts. It really means a lot to hear from you. I think having a 6-foot sidewalk standard, as was originally suggested by the professional consultants that we hired to tell us what we should be doing to improve active transportation in our city, I think we should follow their professional advice. I think that, yes, of course, it'll be wonky and weird that you have 5-foot segments connecting to 6-foot segments, but we'll have a generational change where we're actually taking more of the public right of way and dedicating it to pedestrians to make walking more of a priority. So I would like to see us be able to do that. I'd also like to see us have more buffered bike lanes. This Wednesday is walk and roll to school day, and I'm terrified to ride my bike with my kids from one end of town to the other during the morning commute hours. And that shouldn't be the case in a town that's this small, where we have folks who are trying to do the right thing. My kids are super excited about riding their bikes, and I am really nervous about it. So having those buffered bike lanes, whether it's just a small segment of asphalt versus, you know, something that's protected, I think that really does go a long way. Green paint, while it may look nice, we know that doesn't actually improve safety. I believe that is, you know, painted bike lanes doesn't necessarily create additional safety for bicyclists. So having actual buffered lanes, I think, is the priority. And if this is a generational plan, protected bike lanes, I should say, if this is a generational plan that we know we can't implement now, but we will be over time, I think we should be much more aspirational in leading towards that direction of actually having more protected bike lanes. I'm concerned about the shift away from having a protected class 1 separate smart pathway, the Foss Creek Path. We adopted a plan for the Foss Creek Pathway to go all the way to the north end of town. And I know for the Healdsburg Avenue Improvement Project that we are advancing and that's coming to fruition and very excited about, we're putting bicycles on the road on that bend, which is not the safest place. And I know we're putting more low-income residents, more seniors, and more active uses at the north end of town with the big park that's going to be, you know, in eventually built out there, plus the new 118 units of affordable housing at Saggio Hills, the 50-something units at the Burbank Apartments, plus the 27 condos next to Enzo, and a new hotel up there. So there's a lot of people that are going to be using that north end of town, plus the guests at Montage. And so I'm concerned that we made a change to the Foss Creek Pathway plan where we would have a protected separate bike lane that continues the amazing Foss Creek Pathway that we have now, that was supposed to go all the way to North Village, that we've kind of stopped thinking about what that's going to look like. And I understand we're going to wait for SMART to do something, but I think that we've always been taking the lead on that Foss Creek Pathway, and SMART is coming, but they might not get here as fast as we want them to. And I'd still like to see us advancing the plan for that Foss Creek Pathway to extend, because that's the plan that the city adopted. And I don't recall us ever making an intentional shift to say, we're not going to do the Foss Creek Pathway all the way to the north end of town. I know we decided we were going to do the Healdsburg Avenue project, but I didn't know that was a decision. I don't believe we've actually made that decision to not have the Foss Creek Pathway continue north. I don't know how we could get more bike parking downtown. I feel like we've talked about it on 4 or 5 occasions at this council. even in our goal setting 2 years ago, I heard Councilmember Edwards mention it tonight, and I feel like we keep asking for it, and I don't know how we can do like a quick conversion project to just create, yes, Director Zimmer.
Yes, I do. I agree with you. And we have done a lot of work to try to understand what we needed. We have 2 or 3 bike racks that we purchased recently, one of which is going to go into an existing parking space because that law that we had talked about where the parking adjacent to intersection is going to need to be red curb. It is legal to put a bike rack in those locations. So we're looking at in front of Acorn. In front of Acorn, they had approached us saying they need bike parking. So we're looking at taking the parking space right in front of that one. Beyond that, it becomes the dollar value to purchase more racks, which isn't huge compared to the other projects we're talking about, but we would have to identify that funding. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please interrupt away. A ballpark on the dollar figure to purchase more racks, just so we know the magnitude of cost.
Well, what Michael just purchased them recently. The first one we bought, the one that is in front of Portalupe. So that's part of the reason this has been slow. It's different. Instead of the U-shaped racks on the sidewalk, which are drilled into the sidewalk, we were looking for a different option. We put in the bike rack in front of Portalupe as a test, and we were kind of waiting to see. And we didn't really like that rack. It's a little on the flimsy side to be out in the public. So we have ordered a few more, and I don't know if you can say what the price was per.
Shipping's a huge component of the cost. We ordered 2 from Sportsworks. They're a little beefier.
What's the rough cost?
6,000 is about for
2.
2, so 3,000.
So we need to do a little more shopping around and finding other locations that are closer, and so it's part of the process right now. But we are aware, we're moving on it. We have good plan. There's going to be a lot of places in the downtown area where we're going to have availability to put these in.
Great. I like the idea of having quick build projects. I think, a lot of the time we talk about, trying to amass these huge funds to do it really well. And I know that's the goal long term, but I also have seen, I'm trying to remember back to when Mayor Higley was talking about that $500,000 commitment. I think it was like 2017, maybe. Like it feels like a very long time ago where, we're finally about to break ground next year and get going on the Healdsburg Avenue project. But it takes a decade, to start putting things in motion. And I know that's no one's fault in this room. That is just the way that it works. And so I would love to see us do those interim steps of having those quick builds so that we can start to see results from some of these planning efforts, even if we can't do the full, whatever the activity calls for. And I think the question about the roundabout sidewalk or crosswalks, I have seen some close calls there. And I don't know, obviously I think everything changes when the SMART train comes through the roundabout with respect to how does it all work. And that could be a long ways off or it could be a short ways off. But looking at how do we have safer crosswalks at the roundabout. And then the question about transit planning and the Route 67 and the 60 and the intermodal transit hub, is this plan the right place to be talking about transit and transportation?
It did look at connections to bus stops. So the transit route is within the plan, but transit planning is not active transportation by this definition.
Okay. And then we had a question or a comment about the Healdsburg Avenue segment that is not within the project area of the Healdsburg Avenue improvement plan. So from the roundabout up to Powell, I don't believe is in we don't have plans to change any of that area, but it is identified in the high injury network for the county. It was highlighted as the one high injury network segment in the city. What are we talking about that area? Are we making any proposals for that area?
Not as part of a bike route, no, because it is part of the high injury network. It is relatively narrow and relatively busy. That is not a segment that we would be recommending out for the public to ride on.
What does high injury network mean? I know it's defined in the plan, but I'm just asking to get a little bit.
It's based on the number of accidents and I can't give you the exact numbers. Aaron can probably give it to you, but it's exactly what it sounds like. There are more injuries than normal.
The type, what are the types of injuries we're talking about? Pedestrians, bicycles, car accidents?
So the high injury network segment shown on the map is from the countywide, so SCTA's Vision Zero Action Plan that was previously completed and adopted. And so we took the high injury networks, the high injury network developed there and overlaid it as background information. And so that was generally identified across the county. What are the streets where there's been a history of more severe collisions occurring? So involving any mode. So whether it's somebody walking, biking, or in a vehicle.
Okay. And since we don't have anything in this plan do we have anything in this plan that addresses that segment?
I believe it's in the local road safety plan and we're well aware of it. And, you know, it as other things, yes, we're working on it as we can work on it.
Okay, I appreciate that. What does that mean though? Like, how do we make it so that the one area that
a lot of it is you're looking at, there's a lot of signalized intersections.
Yeah.
So we know many of our intersections need to be upgraded. It's different. The light itself is larger, the backing, there's all these requirements. Then the pedestrian controls with the push buttons, where they're located, looking at the timing of those crossings, looking at the crosswalk, the signage, you know, how things tie in, similar as you would to a Safe Routes to School plan. Is everything up to standard? Looking at the sight distance, you putting red curb at the corners. So it really is going to depend on looking at the specific accident sometimes too, to say, is it an accident you can prevent? Sometimes you get a series of accidents and they're not really preventable by anything we can do. It's drunk drivers or inattentive drivers or just randomness, right? So that is what we're doing. We are working on those intersections. You know, it's going to be a slow process. We can at best afford to do one intersection improvement a year with the budget that we currently have. And that's a little bit of a stretch to get there. And it depends too on how many we have to repair and other issues, because the money can often get sent elsewhere.
Understood. Yeah, I remember when we got the Vision Zero plan at SCTA and they talked about how many people have been killed in our communities, and it's shocking. I mean, it's really devastating. This is a known issue. They're identifying, you know, we paid for this huge plan countywide to pick where in each city is the most dangerous for people. And the one area that's the most dangerous in Healdsburg is Healdsburg Avenue between the roundabout and Powell. I mean, I think it's highlighted on our plan. Right in the middle of it is the highlighted zone. And so I feel like we're spinning our wheels talking about, you know, bike routes and these other things. But like, if we're not identifying the thing that the county has said, this is the most dangerous part of your city, what are you going to do to fix it? I mean, I understand what you're saying. Like, we only have so much money and bandwidth, but to me, it's like, that's a huge deal.
They're separate. We're working on them as we're working on stormwater issues, as we're working on other things. It is called out and shown in here because that's an important factor in our decision-making process and ranking of projects. But this is primarily looking at pedestrian and bike routes and improvements we can make. And I'm sure the intersections that need improvement were also identified in here. Don't know that for a fact, but if they weren't, they will be. So it isn't that we are disregarding it.
No, I don't feel like you are at all. I'm just asking, how can we do a better job helping you to kind of advocate to advance those things?
I hate to sound like a broken record, but it is, we have very limited funding for streets. And there is a lot of pull in a lot of different directions. The projects that City Manager Kay mentioned are taking a lot of the money now and into the future. So the paving projects, the restriping projects, our general maintenance, replacing signs, that's all coming from the same place.
Okay, good to know. And then so you mentioned the Sonoma County Transit that we might be looking at adding an additional route. Where should transit planning kind of live? And how do we better engage on that, or when people kind of want to talk about it here, but that might not be the right place?
That's an excellent question because Sonoma County runs the transit. We as the city interact with them and our partners. They are great partners. But it's still ultimately their system. And so we don't have a great method. We do get a lot of public feedback in a lot of different ways, a lot of different events, but there isn't a formal method necessarily, because often what I say is I take what they're saying, I say, I'm going to pass it on to Sonoma County Transit, but you should call them yourself because they are, you're their client, to be able to get things moving the way they want to. But we as the city, and working with our schools and other people within the community, sometimes have very valuable input. And Sonoma County Transit is always open to hearing what we have to say about where routes should be and the hours they should be and all of that.
Great. I think that we'll figure out how do we point folks to share that input in a more productive way, because it feels like there's a lot of
I think there would
frustration.
be some community engagement when they do extend that route with another vehicle.
Great. And a question for City Manager Kay, can we do more Spanish language outreach on this plan before it gets adopted? I don't know if that's something that the council, would also be interested in, but just wanted to make sure that we don't kind of overlook that before it gets to the final stage.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. It's something we'll put our heads together and we'll think about some creative ways to get to people, meet them where they are. So yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
Thanks so much.
Councilmember Harrod?
Thanks. A number of comments and one question that kind of got left over for me from before. But first, I want to thank the mayor for acknowledging the changes that have happened over time, and that this is really a great milestone that we're at this point, and adoption will be an even stronger milestone. But it's really encouraging that we're here now talking about this, and that there's fresh energy and lots of support for this conversation. I think I really appreciate the comment that Stephanie made about staying positive about the parking changes in our neighborhoods and downtown, and that it's easy to see that there would be friction and difficulty from some people sometimes, but I think we should take some encouragement that things are changing, and that we shouldn't shy away from that battle. Let's not make it a battle. Let's make it collaborative and try to move forward through that with a positive tone and not be too afraid of those changes. I think that's it's maybe not as big a roadblock as we think it is, and I hope it isn't, but I'd like to make sure we stay positive, and it's certainly that Acorn is advocating for bike parking in front of their place is a really great example of that. So I think we'll find other examples as we move forward with this. So I wanted to encourage, there's a lot of practical suggestions that came from all the comment today. And first of all, thank you for all that comment. I think it's helpful to not just come here and say it, but to put it in an email and send it in, make sure that we get it added to the list, and continue on the collaborative process here as we move closer to adoption. So I just want to encourage some of those ideas to get written down on paper, so to speak, and sent in, just to make sure that everything's out in front of everybody who's working at the final product that we're working on here. I want to show support for what Councilmember Kelly said about Foss Creek. We do want to bring it all the way to the end, and not sweep that under the rug. I think that is important that Foss Creek Trail continue moving forward. So thank you for that. Traffic calming. I'm a big supporter of anything that causes people to drive slower. That's another culture change that we can move towards. Nobody needs to be in a hurry. And even some of the speed limits in town, I think, are kind of higher than they need to be. And if you just backed up a couple feet and got a broader view of your life, you won't need to be driving as quickly as you need to be. I'm saying this sort of as a global statement to a lot of people. So I think we should be moving forward with that in whatever way we can. Speed bumps, you made an excellent point that there's big problems with that. So maybe that's not the solution, but there's other tools that we can use, right? And then my question was, did the committee, did the group ever grapple with the parklets that we have downtown as a impediment to bike safety? And because I know there's some safety concerns about those. And was that ever considered as part of the process? Is it in the plan at all?
I don't think it's in the plan anywhere. It was certainly discussed. And yes, it is a concern. Anything that is narrowing the street, it's a very large structure right up against the edge of the parking line, limit line. So it is a concern, but it's not addressed in the plan.
Okay, that might be something to revisit, because it does seem like that should be a bit part of the suggestions moving forward.
It will be coming to council, and I've made a note to make that.
Okay, thank you. And then the idea that we use SMART goals and implement that that format that we have in the CMS into this, I think was a good one. And I know it's limited in terms of time-bound goals, but where possible, I think that's something that would improve the plan, to try to map out, when we can get to some of this stuff. So I'm sure it's going to vary from item to item, how specific you can be with that, but if we can start to be more specific about the time frame for some of this stuff, I think that'll help move things along and just keep the momentum moving forward. And then finally, I just wanted to say that I think there's agreement, maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's agreement that this should be ultimately headed towards the general plan when we get to that this should be a big chapter in that plan when we dive into that in a couple of years here. So let's make sure that we keep that in the back of our minds as we develop the transportation plan. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for the comments. It's really great to hear from personal stories, specific situations, and with kind of aspirational goals all involved in one group of people who came to talk to us tonight. And I appreciate that. And we're looking at something that's huge, that, out 50 years, and also stuff we want to do tomorrow and the next day. So I'm looking at this as like we did with the climate mobilization strategy, I think, where we identified the major goals that were long-term and then really honed in on the things that we could, pick off little bit by little bit and do them. So I would look forward to seeing more of the prioritization and kind of the leveling of, and cost with them. I assume we'll see that when we get into maybe the capital project budget and goal setting. But, this is just a huge plan right now, and we all want it done, and we want it done right now. We all know that can't be happening. So you know, I totally support it. I totally don't want it to be one of those like you know, in my consulting business, I shouldn't admit this either, but a lot of times we do a strategic plan and everybody's all excited about it and then it goes on the shelf and nothing ever happens to it. So I realize what a waste of time and energy that is. And this is not that. And we didn't do this with the climate mobilization strategy either. So I think we've got a pretty good track record for really accomplishing what we say we're going to set out to accomplish. So I think the other thing that I'm struck with is the fact that we're really talking about a huge behavioral change within our community, right? Say, get rid of the parking. Well, okay. I get that long term that we want to change all of this, but short term, how's that going to happen? I live in a neighborhood where every single house has 2 cars. They don't fit in their garages because they don't have enough room. So they're on the street or they're in their driveway. And so until we get people to really move away from cars, I think we still need to consider that piece. So it's going to be a long-term project to get that done and to get people change behavior. And I know that's what this is intending to do. So I appreciate that as well. So I really I guess my bottom line is I want to see it proceed, and I want to see us getting more granular in some of the things and realize that some of it is just major. And let's celebrate the Complete Streets project and Grove Avenue project that haven't even been done yet, but will, and that's going to change our community in a huge way, including up towards Enzo Village, right? That's going to take that street all the way up there to Boxheart. So I'm looking forward to seeing that change as we go.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple comments. I think, you know, going back to when I first got on council, my kids were 3 and 5 years old. And I've told the story about, you know, the perspective that you have when you have little kids and you're riding down the sidewalk and then there's a utility pole right in the middle of the sidewalk and you're trying to like keep your daughter from bonking it with her handlebars and going into the bushes, and it's very inconvenient. Now, you know, my kids are 13 and 11 years old, and when I was DJing the other night at the senior center thing on Friday, I get home and Jackson tells me, "Hey, I got you something." He rode the bike down to the Chevron station and go get a couple of sodas. I didn't tell him he could get a soda, but it was the thought that counts. You know, but the same thing of like, okay, how is, you know, I immediately went back to the Complete Streets project that's coming. So it's been that long, it still hasn't changed, but now it's in the pipeline. It's going to be started. I think we had a completion date of that at 2028, right? And so 3-4 years from now. So it's coming. And it may not, as much as I would love to have that now, the fact that that is now connecting my neighborhood, Parkland Farms, which, you know, not too long ago was considered South Cloverdale, and people were like, that's not even Healdsburg, is now part of that. And we have, you know, residents of Enzo Village. I saw you ride your bike here, you know, so that's the connectivity piece that is huge for me that I'm actually seeing happen. The other one is when you start to see glimpses of what the future looks like. And I look back to, I wasn't able to attend because I was running all over the place, delivering kids to different events and like their sports, but the Bloodroot Festival, I drove back and forth quite a few times dropping kids off. And because I live in Parkland Farms, I drive past there in the morning and then in the afternoon. And as I was driving back in the afternoon, the number of people that I saw walking down Healdsburg Avenue, it just, again, because I know what we've done here and what's coming, I thought, wow, that massive event had all these people there, and I'm sure Foster Creek Trail was packed. People just walking with their coolers along Healdsburg Avenue. And when you think about it, Healdsburg's not that far where they're parking and where they're I mean, it was a beautiful day. That kind of thing really excites me. I do want to make a couple comments about parking and cars. I think we need to keep in mind part of the climate mobilization strategy was to kind of move us more toward electric vehicles. And, you know, I know personally with my lifestyle, I cannot, we can't go down to just one car or no cars or just bicycles. I work in Santa Rosa. Like I said, where we are right now is kids' sports events this way on weekends. And so I think we need to keep that in mind where it's not getting rid of cars and replacing them with bikes. The big goal is getting rid of the gas powered cars and replacing them with EVs, because you still need to be able to, go to the grocery store or load up or, travel. So people are going to have cars. So I think we need to keep that in mind. As much as we want to, eliminate parking, we have to be real about the actual needs of people within our small community that has very limited public transportation that works for a lot of people that, that live here and then commute out for work. I will say that the more safe bike routes we have, the better, because the safer biking is, the more people will bike. The more bike parking there is, the more likely people will bike downtown. I know that's the case for me, where with the parklets, there should be parking incorporated with the parklets, even if it's just like a little hook and, it's like a valet ticket where you roll up to whatever parklet you're going to, you get a tag, they lock your bike. When you're done, they get the tag. You don't even have to haul a lock around. Like, just those kind of, just making it simple would help a lot. One question I had was the bird bikes. So that was funded by a grant program. And for us to try to do it ourselves would not be cheap. However, I think the vast majority of our community that doesn't like and appreciate the bird bikes doesn't understand that there's some heat mapping that's going along, some data that we're collecting from that. So I'm wondering, have we been able to get updates on the heat mapping data? Is that something that you're able to reference as, before this plan is finalized, to see what are the routes that the bikes are going? So it's not so much about the bikes themselves, but where are they where are the flocks ending up?
We do have all that information for bird. It disappears from my view after 6 months, but I'm sure bird has it all. And we do look at it on a very regular basis. And we see how many, not only where they're going, but how many trips are going there, where they're starting, where they're ending.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot more people using it. I mean, I don't know, like, value to use, whether it makes sense in the long term. That's something we'll take a look at when we have to write the check, if there's grant funding not available. But the fact that we have access to that data to see where people are originating their trip and going to, I think is something that's really important to look at to help inform this plan of the bike routes. And then I'm a big believer that, you hear, well, why do we need bike lanes? We have the Foss Creek Trail. It's like, well, but not everybody in a car has to drive down one street. Sometimes I'm driving over here, sometimes it's over here, and it should be the same with bikes. Like, you should be able to have access to the roads like anybody else. A couple others, on parking. Honestly, it comes down, you talked about First Street and the parking on your street. I would argue we have more people living in a house than the house was designed for. I think you look at a lot of these units, and without going too deep, I'm looking at the city attorney over here. Careful what I say. But the bottom line is, we need housing. And the more housing, the people that are here right now are spread out, and it'll help with congestion on the streets and parking and everything like that. So you won't have 5 cars parked in front of one house where 5 families are packed into one unit. It'll be spread out. And then let's see. With regard to the SMART goals, this is one that it's a little more challenging, I think, to get down to that granular level. I really like what you've drawn up with all the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3s, and they'll adjust. And the way I look at things when we're looking at a budget, a capital improvement is, it's not just the one thing, but what else can we layer up underneath that? If there's infrastructure improvements underneath, then that might move one up because, we need to replace the aging pipeline here. And then at the same time, then we can improve the sidewalks in the streets. So that kind of discussion, I really like the idea. I like how this plan is drawn up where you have just the estimated cost based on what it is today. So we have kind of a ballpark, and then we can kind of fine tune that as we go. So I look at that and, arts and culture, CMS, DEI, ATP, HAP, all these initials, they all feed into our council goals. And there's something that we as a council have, really focus and really make sure that we bake those things into what we discuss and go through. So I think those are my comments. I think at this point, you've heard a lot of feedback from the community. You've heard from council. Do you have enough?
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of comments, and I'm not on all of them. There are 3 things that I do need to respond to. And thank you, Mayor Hagley, because the last comment was simple. Okay. Councilmember Mitchell and I think Councilmember Harrod both said something about going towards the SMART goals, being more granular, having a cost for the projects. That is not our intention. That is not what was going to be in the plan. It wasn't in the previous plan. It's not in other agencies' plans as far as I know. We do not have the funding. This again was through a grant that came through SCTA and hired Fair and Pierce. That would be outside of the scope of work. It would be relatively significant, but if council as a majority would like something more like the CMS, we could do that. Again, without funding, I don't know the value of doing that. And without funding or schedule, I don't know how you get a SMART goal out of all of these projects. So again, that wasn't the intention of it. That isn't how they've been used in the past. That wasn't how we're intending to use this tool. Because for us, this is a tool, as I explained, when capital projects, when there's grant funding. This is the place we go to make sure that we're doing it right. We're doing it with this unified vision that council and the community have. So if council wants those things, I would need a group decision on that. And similarly, the 6-foot sidewalk standard, if the rest of council supports that, we can include that, but we will probably have to come back how we implement that, where we would implement that. Because we're gonna have to think about the feasibility of how that would work. Not that we can't, or if there is different language where in certain areas of town or where feasible, or there are other ways to do it. And I can't off the cuff come up with the plan, but I completely hear what you're saying. And yes, we can do that and we can add it. But it would be helpful, I think, if we got nods from the majority and understanding that there'll be a little back and forth to figure out what that looks like.
And then what was the third one?
Well, those two, the SMART goals and the granular adding costs were together.
Okay, and you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about the sidewalk standard and where does it originate from? You guys made the recommendation to have it be 6 foot. City staff said, let's keep it 5. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the methodology or thought process behind the recommendation?
Sure. Excuse me. Yeah, every city has kind of their own standards. And so but specifically the 6 foot width from an ADA perspective, you need to have 4 feet of width that is passable and clear. And so an additional 2 feet gives a little flexibility if you do have other things that impinge upon the passable width for the sidewalk. So kind of allowing for a little more flexibility and still being able to meet ADA accessibility.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, how does this work? Because some of the older sections of neighborhoods, we don't have 6-foot sidewalks. I mean, I think some of them are even 3 feet. Are we talking about?
So the way that works when there's a sidewalk gap, an undersized or a damaged sidewalk, if they pull a building permit, if there is a capital project, if there's some type of trigger, then either the city or the property owner would be required to bring that up to a standard. And so that's the catch, the issue at hand with changing. Are we actually changing our standard to 6 foot so that everybody who pulls a building permit is required to rip out their existing 5-foot sidewalk and put in a 6 foot? I'm guessing that's not council's desire. And those are the finer points that we really need to figure out is what that looks like. You know, a place like Mill District, yes, by all means, we did require wider sidewalks, particularly on the front edge where there's going to be a lot of pedestrians. But I don't have a plan on how that would work. And if that's council's desire, I want to make sure that we're not just putting something in here that we're not going to enforce or do. So like I said, I may need to come back with you, but again, if that's council's desire to work towards a wider sidewalk, or we're just going to make them 6 foot everywhere, that's kind of the direction I need.
To that point, I'd actually like to make a suggestion. I'm not sure. I'm hopeful this is maybe not as common. Meaningful amount of new length. I'm not going to put a number on that right now, that 6 feet is beneficial, and let's do it. And I suspect everybody probably agrees if we're filling in 15 feet in front of, you know, next to somebody's driveway, maybe that extra jagged foot isn't necessary. With that in mind, my thinking, if it's acceptable to the council, the staff can just kind of chew on that a little bit, and come back with some ideas of what that looks like. I don't think there's any objection anywhere to having wider sidewalks where we've got enough length to make it work. And it might be something we can figure out better when we're not deep into a conversation and maybe running on fumes a little bit, but in the time we have before this comes back, if that makes sense to the council.
Yeah. Okay. And then what was the other one? Oh, the smart.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the SMART goals and the granular on the costs. And part of that is every project is going to be different. Those are really generic numbers for what a sidewalk costs, what parking lane. I think it was brought up before with potholes. Restriping to add a bike lane on one street that's in great shape versus one that's torn up. It's huge difference because once you work all that paving in there. So it becomes a huge effort to go through every one of these projects and come up with realistic estimates. As I'm sure you've seen when we have engineering consultants working on a project and then it goes out to bid, sometimes there are pretty big discrepancies. And to do that for all of the projects in here and try to come up with estimates that mean anything would be a very large effort.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, no, and that isn't what I was intending, to go. I don't know about Councilmember Harrod, but you know, I wasn't saying go through all these projects and put a price to them and a time. To me, it's more, this is a way, this is a list of things that, well, it's more than a list, but the whole plan is for us to look at. And when we are looking at our council goals or kind of what we want to do when we're in that arena, we can use this as information on our own, I guess, to decide which we think is more important. And I'm assuming the city is going to be working on some of these things anyway. We already are, right?
Some of them we are the ones that we've named already.
Yeah. And to put prices on them now wouldn't even make sense because they'll change. We know that. So, you know, I'm really meant more looking at it as a plan document for us to utilize to try to come up with some agreements on where we want to go, where we think this should head. So
okay.
Is that
sorry, I may have misunderstood.
Well, I wasn't clear, obviously.
Councilmember Kelly.
I want to thank Mayor Higley about the bird bike data. I think that trips are originating from and ending up at. So I think incorporating that info is great. And I know Dana's here from SCTA. SCTA just launched their e-bike share program at the other cities that have smart stations. And so that, while it's a different company, they'll have more e-bike share happening around the region, which I think will be interesting to see that last mile connection over time. I did want to just follow up on the comment about how do we move away from cars versus EVs versus street parking. Just share that, most homes in our city, we require them to build on-site parking or build garages into the homes. But the problem is most people are using their private garages as storage, and then they're storing their private cars on the street for parking. And so we're actually subsidizing people's storage by allowing them to store their cars on the streets. And meanwhile, we have to ride our bikes in the middle of the street or walk where there's no sidewalk. And so I'm not suggesting that we force people to get rid of their cars. And if my husband's listening, don't worry, you can keep your cars. But it is more the fact that we are trying to get the public right of way, which belongs to everyone, to be able to use that for walking and biking and not just people storing their cars. And if people want to have more cars, then they should be able to store them in their garages, which means maybe they have to get personal storage units or do some, Marie Kondo action and clean out your garage. And I want to be sensitive to that because I know we do have a lot of families living in overcrowded housing in our community, and that is the solution, to build more housing. But also we really have to be, if we want people to do mode shift, which we know is what's going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, which is what the climate mobilization strategy, have to make it harder for people to have so many cars, or they have to store them in their own garage. And we get to this point where we're trying to be sensitive to this issue. And it's like, we have the data. It's very clear that if you have protected bike lanes, more people will feel comfortable riding their bikes. That's literally what the plan says. So we have to follow what the experts are telling us, and that we have to create safe places to bike in our community, and more people will do it. And in order to do that, we have to prioritize the public right of way, to stop letting people store their private vehicles on the public right of way. And I know that's going to be a challenging shift, but at the end of the day, people have garages or driveways or other places to store vehicles. And I think that that's where the rubber meets the road, with actually where this plan will actually yield greenhouse gas emission reduction, is when we can make mode shift happen. And that's going to be the behavior shift that's tough, but that's what leadership looks like.
All right, so I want to wrap this up because I think it's a very positive thing that we're doing here, and back to it's a lot of exciting stuff here. So I am fine with the staff recommendation on the sidewalk width for right now. Nod.
Sorry, to keep it at the current 5 foot.
Yes.
No, I'm not. I'd like to see us prioritize wider sidewalks where possible.
All right, and on the smart, I like the recommendation. I think it's tough at this level to get that granular. I think, once we set our priorities, then we can get some of the goals and all that. But especially to city manager's point, we have a lot that's coming up that we need to get done that are massive projects that are going to have I always use the term move the needle. But Grove Street and Healdsburg Avenue are going to have a huge impact, and same with March Avenue. So I'm fine I like the format that the report is in now.
Yeah, my suggestion that, that we tighten up the priorities within the plan, I guess that's the way I'd rather say it in terms, I don't want to suggest that we put a ton of extra time or money into this, to put time goals on things that aren't realistic. And so that's not my intention. I just want to make sure that things aren't so vague that they're just floating in space. We have some, 3 tiers of priorities or something like that. When the occasion arises, when the time is right, let's, if we're looking year or 2 years out, let's tighten things up where we can. And because I think that just helps us to reach our goals instead of having them float around. But I don't really want to put this back into the machinery to add all that data in.
Thank you. Thoughts? Same? Councilmember Kelly?
For the bike facilities, the slides that we saw with the different levels of facility, is that similar?
That graphic is almost exactly in the plan. And it's in a lot of engineering documents, the different classes of bike lanes. So that is pretty standard. And it was shown as the toolbox, you know, and the different levels. And as I showed you in that slide, trying to enhance to your point, these will come to council. And it's great to know that the direction is yes, presented this way so that you can look at the removal of parking on one side or both sides, particularly on the streets that are identified in here. But just because they're not identified in this plan doesn't mean that council can't move forward with some other project on some other street that isn't named and remove parking or add bike lanes or do other things. This is the vision, the guidance. More bike facilities are better. So there are opportunities.
All right. Well, I think I'd like to just wrap this up. I think we as a council, if you came back to us with a couple $3,000 bike racks for somewhere downtown, that would so throw that on the agenda if
They're going to
needed.
go in without further action at this point. We've talked about that before and the
Yeah.
funding was approved.
Good. Let's do a ribbon cutting. All right. With that, I want to thank everybody that has stayed late. We still have all the exciting things of us reporting out. I really want to thank you, everybody that helped with this plan and contributed. This is a really exciting thing. And like I said, you can sense the motivation up here and in the room too. So thank you very much. All right, so next up is council member reports on matters of interest occurring since previous regular meetings. And so we'll speed it up by saying, if you went to a ribbon cutting that others were there, list them, and then we don't have to repeat it. So we'll start, Councilmember Harrod, we'll start.
I only need 20 minutes. We're good. So, was happy to give council updates to the Chamber of Commerce Board and also to the Sunrise Rotary. That was a real pleasure. Got some good questions from those folks there. Did the Frost Creek cleanup. That was an excellent event, always is. Hurts a little bit the day afterwards, but looking forward to awarding the Cred Cup here soon. I won't give it away if you weren't there. But it was a great day and a lot of good work got done. So thanks to everybody who jumped in on that. My list is out of order, but Healdsburg Center for the Arts Plaza Art Festival. I hope I got the name right. Seemed like a great success. I only spent a little time there, but there was a ton of people there and lots of great art, and it just seemed like the event was really humming. So I hope that was a success for everybody who was involved in that. Another great event was the True West groundbreaking. So we've got theater on the way in Healdsburg that's going to be really visionary. Lots of great educational programs. So really excited to see that taking off. Also, the YWCA childcare at the community center. That's going to make such a meaningful change, such a direct, powerful benefit to some families in Healdsburg. And I hope we can do more of that. That's really, I think, having looked at what childcare does for people, I think, if we can build on what started with that, I think it's going to be a really good thing. So attended the NCPA conference with Mayor Hagley and Director Crowley and learned a lot. And it's a complicated world of public power and power in general. And I'm happy for the opportunity to gain some knowledge there and appreciation for what we have with public power in the city. And then finally I went to the Chamber of Commerce outreach walk, which culminated at our hospital, which was a great opportunity to learn what's going on there, and really valued that we have a hospital in town. And so I appreciate everybody who made that happen as well.
Thank you. You ready, or you want me to come?
Good.
Okay.
I just. I also was able to attend the state collective community with Will Scan at Sonoma State. and attended the Reach for Home annual event out in Alexander Valley. And really excited to see the progress Reach for Home is making in the community. They're making such a huge impact. And I think we're really lucky to have them as a community partner in tackling homelessness. So thanks.
I have a question as we're going here. So right now I looked in the calendar, we have another quarterly update from Reach for Home. I mean, should we switch that to every 6 months, maybe? I feel like they're kind of cooking unless, yeah, we just had one, but there's another one coming up because it's quarterly.
I think what you saw was a little bit of just a quirk of the calendar, and we'll
Okay.
happily oblige. But otherwise, we'll do our best to just, as you know.
I mean, I love
sometimes-
hearing from them, but just.
I think the quarterly was good when they were starting out, and now that it's more established.
Right, there are a lot of questions when it first came up, and so, yeah, maybe next year we can start to cut it down.
It's something we can talk about
Yeah.
at goals.
Or maybe it's like a writ.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. All right, Vice Mayor?
Thank you. So a lot of the same things, the YWCA ribbon cutting. I know you didn't want me to repeat them,
Oh,
but
that's
I'm
okay.
going to. True West groundbreaking, the Chamber Walk, which was we went to a real estate company, the agency. They had a lot of good questions about housing and how we're gonna address that. Dovetail, beautiful, kind of an art gallery, retail store, beautiful. And then the hospital. Foss Creek cleanup. I did not do the cleanup, so I felt pretty good the next day. I was just there. I filled in for the mayor to just kind of kick the thing off. So that was great. And then I went home. Reach for Home Gala. I spent a ton of money, just so you know, but I got a trip to Kauai. Yeah, I won that, won it. And the council forum, which was very interesting.
I attended a really good event with James Gore and Sonoma County Water Agency, really looking at how technical detail they are getting into projecting our water needs through weather forecasting, which was really interesting, how far ahead they're thinking on that one. Also in the Russian River Watershed Association on the 26th of this month, you'll be hearing about the drug take back for prescription drugs. That'll be coming up on the 26th. And I attended all the same events that Chris did, and a really fun event with our mayor this week with the celebration for the senior center. That was a blast. She was there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was just incredibly fun event to see how our seniors, and what was really nice to me was there was a younger couple at the table I was at, and they actually moved their mother to Healdsburg because of our senior center and the events we have. And she is just thrilled to be in such an active senior community. It was just great to hear that.
Yeah, that was fun. Let's see, I met with the incoming chair of the board, Jim Hyde, and had conversations about how the chamber and the city can work better together. And what I really stressed with him is the chamber needs to be more involved at the beginning of the discussion of some of these items instead of at the very end. So, you know, like you have with the upcoming agenda items, just take a look. If there's something there, show up so that you're kind of coming along instead of at the very end, whether it's L&M or, you know, some of the climate mobilization strategy where somebody's like jumping in at the very end, but not there with the process going along.
I had a great conversation with him too. I'm really
Yeah, I appreciated him reaching out just to kind of get that. I'll skip over the other two, NCPA and True West. On the first, I did one of my favorite things here with Raina, where and Lonnie was there, and we did a tour of Healdsburg City Hall, where the kids, this time it was, I think, third graders from the Healdsburg school, and took them on a tour of City Hall. We end up here with a fake council meeting, and they kind of learn about, you know, city business. And it's always fun because I feel like it makes city council and government more approachable when they see behind the scenes and see our staff working and asking questions like, how heavy are these plans? And, you know, what are those bricks for? And, you know, it's a lot of great questions. Good Morning Healdsburg was very valuable. It's been recorded, and that was the district attorney's office got some grant funding to really focus on retail theft. And it's very unique with Healdsburg, but the idea was to kind of get the word out on how to prevent that. And what they're really working with is like our police chief, they have contacts so that if there is a crime that's committed, the retailer can then report that and it goes directly to the district attorney's office and they can compare what happened there with maybe something that happened in Windsor or Sonoma to try to connect these to then charge that as a felony and really have an impact that, you know, the retailers might think, well, I'm not even gonna bother reporting it because it's, you know, $600 or under the limit. But by combining these, they're really making an effort to address some of the issues that our retailers are facing. And then I attended the ribbon cutting over at, how do you say it? SKLO, S-K-L-O, SKLO. Second time I was there, this one was for Design Healdsburg. And it was great to go there again and see everybody and the excitement and really get the word out that the application period is opening for the Arts and Culture Master Plan to try to, you know, cast a wider net of people that could apply for that, including designers. That, you know, so you have that kind of artistic element, but you have more diverse viewpoints on some of these commissions. So that's all I had. So with that, it's 9:30. I want to thank everybody. Linda, you stuck it out. And with that, we'll call it a meeting.